Good afternoon, honorable members. Honorable members, when the business of this House suspended for the luncheon break, the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island was in the middle of his contribution. The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, just before lunch, in my presentation on behalf of Exuma, I pointed out that Exuma and Ragged Island, I pointed out that these bills are complex, cumbersome, and it's really heavy stuff. I endeavored to do a rather clinical examination of them and had no intention of being controversial at all today. But I made a few points. As it relates to transparency, the PLC passed the Freedom of Information Act, and this administration had 4 years and has not implemented it. The third point I made was in relation to Kata. The member for Kalani acknowledged and recognized that they made some contributions to these bills. I pointed out that these bills will need some amendments, no doubt, in the local context. And I want to point out my appreciation for public servants who contribute to these bills. The work of public servants is not easy. And any criticism that I may have is directed at the policymakers rather than the civil servants and the hard-working team at the Ministry of Finance. The next point I made was that the government, Ministry of Finance, set up a sinking fund a few years ago in relation to the $750 million US bond. And there's been no contribution to that fund in the last 6-month period. And I also pointed out that in relation to the way it is booked on page 8, it notes clearly that recurrent expenditures have been adjusted to exclude the sinking fund balances, as these represent investments in future financial assets, etc., which seemed to imply to me that there has been some change in the methodology of accounting for it. The point I am making is, had this adjustment not been made, the deficit would have been a larger number. So two things happened. As I pointed out, the administration stopped contributing to the sinking fund, as well as we stopped recording the sinking fund as an expense, according to these estimates on page 8. Mr. Speaker, let me, in the interest of time, speak a bit to the financial treatment as well of the Grand Lucayan Resort. I've pointed out before that the logic that underpins the booking of this as an investment completely is flawed. I pointed out before, I'll point out again, that the minute we paid more than the appraised value, the excess ought to have been an expense. Also, the operational expenses to date ought to have been booked as an expense rather than an investment. I want to point out that Clause 71 of this bill states that the guarantees given by the government for benefit of Lucayan Renewal Holdings Limited shall be deemed to have been given under this Act and shall be acted upon accordingly, and notwithstanding anything contained in those enactments, all future guarantees shall be given under this Act. So my question is, if the guarantee is given by the government for the benefit of Lucayan Renewal Holdings Limited falls under the Debt Management Act, then why does this administration continue to insist that the mortgage is not a debt directly of the government? In any event, this legislation calls for broader use of sinking funds. I support sinking funds, but this administration has not been consistent with servicing the current one or setting up the last one that they promised to put in place. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to the Public Procurement Bill. This is, again, important legislation, but I will say quite clearly that I don't believe this administration has made any serious commitment to transparency on public procurement. And I will explain why I say this. You would recall that last summer we borrowed $250 million from the IMF through a rapid financing instrument. This was to shore up our coffers because of the border closures, etc. In May 22, 2020, in the letter of intent, the managing director of the IMF asking to access that rapid financing instrument, here's what this administration said it will do. We will adhere to the best practices in procurement and contract awards related to the pandemic, ensuring transparency, ease of tracking of COVID-19 expenditures in the budget. That was said by the then Minister of Finance. I note that that has not happened. I also note that contrary to Section 10(2) of the Emergency Powers Act, you have not reported expenditures as it relates to the expenditures during the emergency audit, despite the requirement to do so. I don't want this administration thinking that they are above the law. They have not laid the reports of the Fiscal Responsibility Council. They have defied the reporting requirements of the Fiscal Responsibility Act in large measure, yet we bring additional bills today in the name of accountability. I find this laughable. You also have not presented audited financials of the Disaster Recovery Authority. I'll talk a bit about that later on. But I think you can understand why people believe this administration only talks the talk. They talk transparency, but is not seriously committed to it. A few more points about the meat of the bill. Clause 46.3 allows the minister to specify through an order that a certain percentage of procurement can be sourced domestically. And the minister can also specify a certain percentage of procurement that can be sourced using SMEs. I can get behind this. I think this is a good thing. But it perhaps should have established thresholds and been more firmly set out what those thresholds are. And that's what a PLP administration will do. Clause 48 deals with bid security, and I think we have to be a bit careful with that. You don't want to lock people out from the process in such a very broad base matter. Given the clauses of the section, clause 66 sets out how the appeal tribunal can set up panels to hear appeals. And I believe in one case, it points out that a single member of the tribunal, even if it is the president, have the sole say over the appeal. That seems a little odd to me. Section 72 to 74 talk about the debarment process. That's conditions under which someone might be excluded from the bidding altogether. A very broad set of reasons. It seems potentially problematic, and I think the bid should simply be accepted or rejected on their merits. It seems to carry with it the potential for abuse and subjectivity. In relation to the statistics bill, I know that the leader of the opposition will speak to this bill in some detail, but let me just say that for this department to function properly as the central agency for statistical information in Bahamas, the most important thing, three things, I believe, are independence, a clear commitment, three things. A clear commitment for funding and resources, adequate resources, and a clear operating mandate. I am not sure that this bill satisfies all of those requirements. I think it falls short. Mr. Speaker, converting the Department of Statistics to an authority doesn't necessarily address these issues. Being an authority alone is not sufficient or not necessary for a statistical agency to be independent, to ensure adequate funding, and to have very specific and clear mandates. Mr. Speaker, before I close, I want to talk a little bit about the unaudited financial statements that were laid for the Disaster Recovery Authority. that was tabled by the minister responsible. This report is worrisome, and I find it most incredible. This report raises some very serious issues that I don't have the time to fully air out, but I will make a request that the PAC examine this report. I'd be remiss if I did not put these questions to the Minister of State or the Minister for Finance, who is also the Prime Minister, under whose authority this falls. First, these reports are unaudited, which I believe is contravention of the act which established the authority. This was admitted, I believe, by the director of the authority in the Nassau Guardian last week. Of course, I do not envy the new minister. No doubt that minister will need to draw a line in the sand and respond to the past at some point as she endeavored to move forward. The financial information is provided for period December 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2020. According to this document, the authority has spent more money than was allocated to it by this House. As of December 31st, 2020, there are payables of $2.5 million, but current assets of only $1.2 million, representing cash and amounts due from the government. And I wonder, how is that legally possible? The authority is almost exclusively funded by government subvention, which would represent appropriations from Parliament. Government ministries, departments, and agencies are prohibited from exceeding the annual budget allocations approved at each annual budget exercise unless supplemental budget bills are presented and approved by the Parliament. And I wonder whether this authority is reaching those mandates, which to me are very clear. And if they are breaching them, what are the legal consequences of doing so? I trust that there will be some. Note 6 of the unaudited financial statements say the DRA has been primarily funded, and I quote, under budget heads in 2019-2020 and 2020-2021 annual budgets and or discretionary approvals via the Cabinet of the Bahamas. Under which budget heads were the funds located? And I will provide a copy of my presentation to the minister so that at some point an appropriate response might be forthcoming. I would note that the Cabinet of Bahamas has no discretionary authority on these matters. Yes, it can reallocate budget heads, but this should be communicated by the Ministry of Finance and the authority in these financial statements. This begs the question as to who is accountable for the authority's spending prior to the budget allocation received, as that is putting a commitment on the government which was not approved by this Parliament. I can assure you that this will not be the last time you hear from me on this matter. The Public Accounts Committee of this Parliament will be asked by this member to investigate the Disaster Reconstruction Authority and report its findings to this Parliament. I also intend to release a more detailed analysis of this report in short order. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I wish to thank the wonderful people of Exuma for their overwhelming turnout this past weekend. It was an epic show of love and support, and I want them to know that I love them too. The feeling is mutual. I love the people of Exuma Keys and the people of Ragged Island too. In John 9:4 in the good book, it says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, because the night cometh when no man can work. And this is why I am comfortable with running on my record. This is why I'm offering again on my record. I have noticed that people with no track record and nothing to claim choose to campaign on mistruths, personal attacks, gutter politics, and disgraceful name calling. But I will run on my record. I am glad I worked for my constituents each day, whilst it was day. For the night cometh, when no man can work. And I promise the people of Exuma and Ragged Island that I will continue to serve them with diligence. Mr. Speaker, I close as I salute the life and times of Leonard John Skeeter Dames, age 92. Leonard John Skeeter Dames, age 92. I salute the life and times of a long and productive life. He was a member of the National Sports Hall of Fame. He was an Exumian from Roll Town, Exuma. He's a stalwart of the PLP, a loyal supporter, and a great all-around Exumian. In 1954, he was a member of the first national track and field team at the Commonwealth Games in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today, I herald his achievements and his contribution to our country as I offer condolence to his wife, Dorothy, his sisters, Aunt Dolly and Aunt Scylla in Roll Town, and all of his children, including Administrator Leonard Dames Jr. and the entire Dames family. I trust that his soul will rest in peace, rise in glory, and his work and his contribution to our great country will always be remembered. With that, Mr. Speaker, I rest, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to provide some information on the two questions I think the member asked. And just to say that, one, the details of the COVID spending is included in the quarterly reports the Ministry of Finance produces. The last quarterly report was issued recently, and it details all of the categories where the money has been spent. The details, if you want to know line for line, I'm sure that the Ministry of Finance will be able to provide that for you. But the reporting of it is in the quarterly snapshot. No, the COVID spending. Secondly, with respect to the, pardon me? Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that it is being reported. Yeah, okay, yeah. So secondly, with respect to the audit for the Disaster Recovery Authority, I'm sure the member probably would have seen an advertisement in the newspaper just recently where the Ministry of Finance has put out a request for tender for the audit of that report. So as soon as that is done, I'm sure that will be presented to the House. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Thank you very much.
Just so that there's no misunderstanding, Mr. Speaker, the point I made was that the law required that there be a specific report presented to Parliament in relation to COVID spending. That has not happened. Okay, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, the law, I believe it's the 10th section, I cited it in my presentation, section 10.2 of the COVID, the regulation. We've spoken to this. We've spoken to this, Mr. Speaker, several times over and over. The minister is well aware of the requirements under the rules. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that the rules of this Parliament and the Disaster Recovery Authority mandate that audited reports are laid on the table. Since we have those unaudited reports, I want to be absolutely clear that I need not wait now for the audit. That needs to be done and presented, but we will begin the examination now because there are some things that concern us in the unaudited reports that's been presented, and this member intends to ask the PAC to begin such investigation. Just to be clear in relation to the points raised by East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Centerville.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and honorable members.
Can you give the honorable member some volume?
This one? Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. You know, when the one-man band puts Mount Moriah and Carmichael together, when I'm about to speak, he knows it kind of calms me down because, you know, they might have the most respect for those two gentlemen. But today, it's a compliment. It's a compliment. But they teaming up now. You see, that's a team. The one-man band, Mr. Speaker, a dictatorship or a democracy? Mr. Speaker, we shall lend. This country shall lend and not borrow. We shall be the head, Mr. Speaker, and not the tail. Today, we debate the Public Procurement Bill, Statistics Bill, Public Debt Management Bill, Public Finance Management Bill. Mr. Speaker, this is Dangling the Carrot Season Part 8 and the Cookie Jar Part 1. Good afternoon once again, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, members and the constituents of Centerville and the entire Bahamas. Thank you to God and the people of Centerville for this opportunity to represent you and to represent us and to represent our children, the children of the constituency of Centerville. Mr. Speaker, I said it at the beginning of my last presentation, and I'll say it again. This administration is not only running out of money, it's running out of time. This compendium of bills, Mr. Speaker, appears to be a direct policy obligation of the IDB. They are reformational, and they all have their place in the proper governance of our country and our people. I am glad to see that the IDB is placing significant emphasis on governance and how the implications of how we spend and govern that spending has a direct impact on the very lives of our Bahamian people. These bills, Mr. Speaker, deal with governance. But will we follow them in the way that the law is written to ensure proper and adequate compliance? I don't know. History and track record, Mr. Speaker, has shown that our governance structures are too interwoven with political influence, and therefore we are unable to maximize the results of the management of the affairs of our people. The UN indicated in an article today in The Guardian that our regressive tax structure is insufficient, and that even though VAT expanded the tax base, it was a disadvantage to the poor, to the people of Centerville, our people, my people. Centerville is very happy we voted no against the increase of VAT, which disproportionately impacts the less fortunate and the poor. Mr. Speaker, for more than 3 years, I have been asking this administration to meet their legal obligations to this House. The Minister of Education has yet, Mr. Speaker, to bring the financial information on the University of the Bahamas, and over the past 3 years, we have given them more than $140 million. The IDB's focus, Mr. Speaker, is on governance. So we have a lot of work to do. They still speak of their government's efforts regarding fiscal administration and responsibility. Mr. Speaker, the minister has not bought the financial information on BTVI, and we would have given them more than $42 million. Does BTVI look like a $42 million institution? The IDB's focus, Mr. Speaker, is on governance. We have a lot of work to do. Financial responsibility, my colleagues, is also about fiscal and financial compliance. How can we speak to financial responsibility strategies without speaking to the existing legal financial compliance issues in this place? But I understand, Mr. Speaker, it's the one-man band. The dictator is on the loose. Many instruments and band players, band members, but one player. The dictator is even running in Centerville, Mr. Speaker. Now he's in Abaco, in Agua, Kalani. Where else does he want to be? The dictator is on the loose. I said no name. I didn't mention a name.
Honorable member, just a moment. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Member for Centerville, in his enthusiasm, and we all understand that he is of the view that there's a dictatorship, but there is he isn't disingenuous in his remarks. There is nothing wrong with the leader of this country if he's implying of him in such a manner, or the leader of the Free National Movement from supporting his members of parliament. I think it is disingenuous, and he should not speak of that in such a way.
Thank you very much. He can't help himself.
Oh, yeah.
Honorable member.
Oh.
His
Honorable member. I think the issue being raised is the reference to an honorable member as being a dictator.
I didn't reference him.
You need not reference anyone specifically. Once you're making reference to a member of this honorable house. Honorable member, to your feet.
Mr. Speaker, okay, I'll change the word from the
Carry on.
to a. I said a dictator is on the loose. A dictator's on the loose.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
Speaker, as the honorable minister behind me, indicated, we all have personal views, but we are guided, Mr. Speaker, by the protocols and rules of this place. And those rules indicate that we ought to refer to each other in a particular way. And so while we're on our feet, Mr. Speaker, it's important for us to... Speaker.
Honorable member, carry on.
Speaker, I hope nobody is offended that I refer to Angleston as the leader, because I believe she is going to be the leader. But the rules indicate, Mr. Speaker, the rules indicate that we ought to refer to each other in a particular way, and there are reasons for that. And so I would ask the honorable member to not refer to any member by that. Now, once I have permission to refer to Angleston as the leader, I'm okay.
Honorable member, I would ask that you conform to Rule 33, subsection 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Mr. Speaker,
I support.
thank you very much. The system, Mr. Speaker, the system has found a good one. The system, Mr. Speaker, will ride it to the core, even if it means taking our country down with it. I have asked the Minister of Tourism to bring the financial information for the Airport Authority. And we have given them more than $16 million over the past 3 years. We've now added to their responsibility a working bond of more than $160 million when you're talking about redoing the airports in the Family Island. An organization, Mr. Speaker, that has not met its legal obligation to this House. The minister then quirked about sending them to me directly and the fact that they were done. I never received an email from the minister, and the financial information was never tabled. Mr. Speaker, I would not vote for a member, and I hope the Bahamas is listening to this, or a government that refused to meet their legal obligations to this House while our children are legislatively being accosted. By the way, Mr. Freetown, he isn't here today. Where is the IDB loan of $35 million given in January of 2017 for these same Family Island airports? Where's the additional $70 million given in June 2018 for the same Family Island airports? Our problem in this country, Mr. Speaker, is governance. It isn't about whether we're referring to someone as well, I'm gonna try not to use dictator or not.
No point of order. No.
A serious concentration of the IDB, Mr. Speaker, is governance. We are putting our lending credibility in peril.
No minutes have nothing to say on
I have asked the Minister of Freetown for the financial information on Bahamas Air, an organization we've given more than $16 million to over the past 3 years.
Defend your minister.
The IDB is focused on governance, Mr. Speaker, and governance is our issue. We want fiscal and debt management, but you don't want to comply with your own laws. But I understand it's a one-man band. Many band members, but one player. Many instruments, but one player. I've asked a member for Bamboo Town for financial information on the Public Hospital Authority, and we would have given them approximately $1 billion in 4 years. And on NHI, we have given them more than $72 million over the past 3 years, yet they have not met their financial reporting legal obligations to this House.
Oh.
But I understand, Mr. Speaker, it's the one-man band. The IDB is focused on governance. It is my opinion that our borrowing capacity, like my opinion on the dollar-for-dollar valuation, is in peril. We must vote these parties out in the best interest of our children. They refuse to meet their legal obligations and refuse to meet their parliamentary obligations. Meanwhile, increasing taxes, dictatorship emergency orders, and carrot campaigns. More than $1.5 billion, Mr. Speaker, and no financial reports as required by the law. They must go. The one-man band, Mr. Speaker, don't think we deserve anything, you see. The cabinet members, you can't even buy a house, the one-man band won't get rid of you. Banks, you must, but the banks have to be vigilant. You cannot lend money based on this political job. It's not sustainable. One day you're making $120,000, the next day you're making $20,000 a year. It's simply not sustainable. Help us, help us, help us, please help us to protect ourselves and our children from these models of political poverty that leaves a nation desperate for political favors.
Yes.
People do not go out buying all these things, and worse, at the behest of a one-man band. Dog will eat your lunch. The small contract people can't even get paid on time, Mr. Speaker, because the one-man band don't think they deserve anything. All for me, baby. I thought we got rid of that. Well, Bahamians, it's back and manifested itself throughout the party system. And then you can come in here and say you can take care of the poor people in your next term? Really? Well, give me a break. No money, Mr. Speaker, no money in the cookie jar. Everything is now in the carrot jar. From cookies to carrots. The cookie jar is the Bahamians' people's money, the consolidated fund. The carrot jar is the one-man band campaign money. And the jar is full.
No point of order.
Get your carrots, but vote for the cookie. The cookies are about us, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people. The carrot is about them being elected to the House. So take the carrot and vote for the cookie. Mr. Speaker, the bills before us are timely bills, as the government will need to borrow more money and seek to portray to the outside world that we are serious about statistics, procurement, and public debt management. Mr. Speaker, the Procurement Bill was laid in this House since May of 2020. If it was that serious and that important, why are we almost just short of a year later discussing this? Which means the legislative standards may or may not have been followed during the distribution of contracts for the past period. The politics of that, Mr. Speaker, is serious. But you know, I understand. It's the one-man band and it's the carrot season. Procurement, Mr. Speaker, is serious business. And the law says that this department must even bring AFS, audited financial statements, to the House. And we must believe that you will do that, that really that will happen. You all really think the IDP believes you? I understand it's the one-man band. There's been lots of discussion about the increase in minimum wage, and Centerville is definitely a proponent of increasing the minimum wage. I want to thank the government and the Public Policy Institute of the University of the Bahamas, in particular, Leslie Archer, Bridget Hogg, Olivia Saunders, Brittany Johnson, and Vijay Peramo, for the work that they did on the Bahamas Living Wages Survey. I'd like to table this document, Mr. Speaker, because it's an important aspect of why culturally we must be our brother's keepers. Quite a few Centervillians, Mr. Speaker, have been on minimum wage, Mr. Speaker, for 15 and 20 years. And I've been told, and I have witnessed, that this is really nothing new. Many of whom work for the public service. These are individuals, Mr. Speaker, our governments expect to grow and have families.
Some just reaching against straight.
Mr. Speaker, food prices go up, taxes are going up, rent, utilities, but not a minimum wage. Centerville, however, will vote to borrow, and if you're going to borrow more to improve the wages and lives of our people, sure. But they won't increase the minimum wage, as they've been studying this for many, many years, more than 10 years, and nothing has happened. Well, something did happen. Mr. Speaker, the one-man band don't think the people of Centerville deserve anything. The PLP didn't think the people of Centerville deserve anything. They truly believe that the people of Centerville can have a family of 4 with one person on minimum wage and make it. That's crazy. It's ludicrous. Both parties, Mr. Speaker, it's a system. You know, they would want me out of here, I'm sure. They want me out because They want to keep us beholding to a system that need them for a cup of water and or a school book and a pencil. Centerville is not interested in that. We can buy our own book and pencil. But we are tired of it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Statistics Bill. Very proud, actually, of this legislation as it taps into the foundation of our issues. I applaud the promotion of a proper procurement process that endeavors to be accountable and transparent. I applaud the debt management bill that seeks to encourage adequate accounting, treatment, and risk management. Public debt management, Mr. Speaker, I think everyone understands my position on the devaluation of the Bahamian dollar in a government that has a creativity and a governance crisis. So I won't speak to that aspect, except that I just do not understand why would we borrow money to pad reserves?
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Point of order. Mr. Speaker, the member was asked in a previous communication not to say or suggest that the Bahamian dollar has been devalued. I don't want to interrupt his speech, but he was given the explanation why, and he accepted and he withdrew then. You can't come in a following communication and do the same thing, Mr. Speaker. Please.
Honorable member for Centerville, are you able to substantiate your claim?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know. Well, the member for Southern Shore says I said something. Do you remember what I said? Or you have the exact words? Because I'm trying to look here. And do you want me to repeat what I said? So maybe that could help.
Mr. Speaker, it's on the record that the member just suggested that the Bahamian dollar is devalued. He just suggested that.
This is what
And if that isn't what you suggested, make sure you clear it up to take it off the record.
Mr. Speaker, let me just read what I said because I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
I said the public debt management, I think everyone understands my position on the devaluation of the Bahamian dollar in a government that has a creativity and governance crisis. I don't see what he is referring to.
I'm referring to the suggestion that the Bahamian dollar is devalued. You just said that.
In that? I said, I think everyone understands my position on the devaluation of the Bahamian dollar.
Honorable member, honorable member for Centerville, give us an explanation of what you mean by that statement.
Mr. Speaker, I think I'm in the best interest. I understand what you're saying, and Southern Shores he's speaking to a last communication. And if I were to go into the explanation, it would go back to the last communication. And so here I said that I think everyone understands my position on the devaluation. Now you are asking me to go back into the reason for my thought on the devaluation, which I spoke of, but in the last session, we changed devaluation to buying power. So we'll change it to buying power just in the best interest of time and moving forward. Okay?
Thank
Is
you,
that all
honorable
right?
member. Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Southern Shores. I think with you're here to defend. We'll try to save that seat. Yeah, I hear you. So we won't talk about that. Reserves, Mr. Speaker, should come from creativity and opportunity. In my opinion, not from loans, right? I appreciate your attempt with these pieces of legislation, and can only look on our legislative and enforcement record as you would have displayed earlier. But we wish our country the very best. Mr. Speaker, just allow me a few minutes to speak to a communication that the former Minister of Finance would have given. And he stood up, Mr. Speaker, in this house. I couldn't believe it. And complained why this and that wasn't done in his constituency. Mr. Speaker, I thought I was hearing things. The people of Centerville thought they was hearing things. The deputy leader of the Free National Movement, the deputy prime minister of this country, former, well, he was deputy then, and the minister of finance of this country said his constituency is a national embarrassment. How am I? And this ain't a one-man band. And y'all don't think this a one-man band? The deputy can't get nothing. I ain't talking about no Brave. I talking about Centerville. The deputy can't get nothing. What you want me to do?
Honorable member for Centerville, the member for East Grand Bahama. Chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to.
Honorable members.
I want the member to withdraw and restate that I said that the constituency of East Grand Bahama was a national embarrassment. I never said such a thing. Never said such a thing. Get it right. I never said it.
Honorable member for Centerville.
Yes.
The member for East Grand Bahama is disputing what you allege you said. Can you substantiate it?
Yes, well, okay, I cannot, he is using the word constituency, right? Yeah, well, thank you, sir. In all, with all due respect, I appreciate your swan song. It just wasn't, it didn't.
Honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
I don't want the member to infer, put words in my mouth. I said what I said, and I stand by what I said. But I never, in any of the communications that I've given in this house, said that the constituency of East Grand Bahama is a national embarrassment. Never said it. And I do not want that on the record. And he should
Honorable
withdraw it.
member for Centerville.
He never said it.
If you cannot substantiate it, you would have to.
No, well, he didn't say, and I will withdraw the constituency, but he did reflect on the recovery efforts as a national embarrassment for his constituency. So that's what he said.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
The member should narrow down what I said. Because I spoke to a specific issue. Specific issue. Right? And so speak to the specific issue. Right? Speak to the specific issue. And we can't move on.
I don't care what.
Honorable member.
Sorry, go on. No,
Honorable member.
sorry.
The member for East Grand Bahama is disputing what you're saying, so you have to either substantiate it or withdraw it, or otherwise I would be forced to expunge it.
Correct. But what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, which I would have said was, okay, he did not say his constituency, but he did reference issues in his constituency as a national embarrassment. That's what he did. I'm looking for it.
It needs to be specific. I made the comment in respect to a specific issue. And if he cannot reference that specific issue, then he needs to withdraw his comment. Now, when he finds it, he can bring it back. But he can't make them generalization because it is untrue. Categorically untrue.
Our embarrassment reference to his constituency. But I just want to read it from The Guardian, March 12th, Friday. It says, Travis Cartwright Carroll.
Are you adopting?
I am adopting, yes. It says, more than a year and a half after Hurricane Dorian laid waste to parts of Abaco and Grand Bahama, East Grand Bahama MP said last night that it is a national embarrassment that many of his constituents still have to sleep in camping tents exposed to the elements and insects. So he did make reference to issues in his constituency as being a national embarrassment.
Just one. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of order again. Listen, again, I am not going to help the member to point out exactly what I said, but he has a responsibility, if he's going to bring it here, to have done his homework. Now, I can't answer for Travis Carroll, Cartwright Carroll, and what he heard and what he might have reported. But I'm saying to him, and I'm saying to this house, that I did not say that my constituency was a national embarrassment, nor did I speak to the overall recovery as a national embarrassment. I spoke to a particular issue. A particular issue. No, that's not it. Again, that's not it. That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
Thank you, Honorable
Not
Member.
with
Please
respect to the
confirm.
dents.
Honorable Member for Centerville,
The specific issue I spoke to.
the report that you're making reference to,
Yes,
is that quoted or that is the opinion of the
quoted.
writer?
quoted.
Read it.
East Grand Bahama MP Peter Turnquist
That's in quotes.
said last night,
In quotes?
the quote starting now, it is a national embarrassment, in quotation, that many of his constituents still have to sleep in camping tents exposed to the elements and insects while 40 domes sit in containers in high rock.
Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama, yes.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I admit that I'm trying not to help him, because unfortunately, in this particular circumstance, I believe the reporter quoted. He got two quotes mixed up, okay? And he reported the one comment about everything. That's not the way it worked. I'll give him this hint. I was talking about Sweeting's Key and a particular issue in Sweeting's Key. That's what I referenced. Okay? So again, if you're gonna quote correctly. And you can't say that the reporter said, right? Because the reporter sometimes hear a little bit different too. Right? But no, I'm not. I'm trying to help the member. Be specific. Well, I know you're done, but I mean,
I think based on what you have, because I wanted to.
Honorable Member for Centerville.
Yes.
The member is disputing the actual report. So, out of an abundance of caution, I would request the transcript from the hands of the member's contribution so that a determination can be made. In the interim, I would suggest that you table the newspaper so that we can make reference when we receive the Hansard report. We order that the document be brought up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You take them out. 15 years. 20 years. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Oh, sorry.
Order that the document do lie on the table. Honorable Member for Centerville.
Mr. Speaker, national embarrassment. Centerville have people sleeping in cars. I have constituents set up to sleep in cars. Can't find food to eat, and you're going to tell me you were the deputy leader of a party? And deputy prime minister and minister of finance, and your people, after a year and a half, are still camping out and insects biting them? Mr. Speaker, it's no excuse for that. There's no excuse. And if this is a party issue, they need to deal with it. The deputy leader.
Honorable Member, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
I just want to clarify one thing before the record gets. I would, if you'd permit me, the quote that the member underlined as being quoted, talks about, quote, national embarrassment, end quote. What I heard was more was in the quote. So maybe he might want to just take a look. Only two words, national embarrassment. I'll hand the paper back up. Now, this is what he's underlined and signed as adopted.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's all that is tabled. Yeah, but he didn't table it yet. No, it's not calming down. It's being accurate and making sure you do not mislead the House.
Speaker or honorable members.
Just a minute, Senator. Let me see that. Honorable member for Barnstown, I do agree with your intervention. Let the record reflect that the first honorable members, let the record reflect that the first paper, well, the document table thus far, the 12th of March, the Nassau Guardian, 12th of March, with a story written by Travis Cartwright Carroll. The quoted segment of that statement refers to only national embarrassment. The rest of it is the writer's opinion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also table the full article, which has in quotes,
Give the source and the date.
it's Nassau Guardian, Friday, March 12th, 2021, and it is A5. So it's just the completion of that article, same story. It says, 20 container homes donated by the MSC Foundation. And I see them in the book, the annual report, this is in quote, are damaged. And in the annual report, he quoted that this is also in the annual report by the DRA, are damaged and strewn around Sweetens Key is nothing less than what I consider, and I'm speaking in quote, a national embarrassment. I'm sorry, I call it like it is, not to offend anyone. These are the facts. And so I would also like to table this document, Mr. Speaker.
Order that document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And like I was saying, that my constituents are living in cars, some of them, and some of them are still hard pressed finding food to eat. And so when we talk about a national embarrassment, and you are the deputy leader of a party, you are the deputy prime minister. Centerville, please tune in, listen to this. The minister of finance. You see the trend of these parties? Be careful. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in his message, because I did ask for the East End's presentation, but I wasn't able to get the his speech. But he blasted them over the housing situation, school situation, What a situation. Mr. Speaker, this sounds like Centerville, but Mr. Speaker, he was the Deputy Prime Minister of our country and the Minister of Finance. Much like Perry Christie, Mr. Speaker, in Centerville. He had the voice and he had the pen. The one-man band pen to make the lives of his people better, and he didn't. And then y'all want to invade Centerville with this bunch of red t-shirt and yellow t-shirt. Y'all think we stupid, eh? As an MP, Mr. Speaker,
Just a minute. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, it is trite to say that the rules of debate, Mr. Speaker, require that the debate be on what is relevant to the bill that's before this House. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, if I may, Mr. Speaker, if I may, Mr. Speaker, it is.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, if can I get
Carry on, honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, yes, and yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have first of all, Mr. Speaker,
Honourable members.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, the comments that the honourable member is referring to, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that those were comments made by the East Grand Bahama member during a debate on the mid-year budget. And we well know, Mr. Speaker, that the mid-year budget debate has a lot of latitude, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of latitude, but we are no longer in the mid-year budget debate, Mr. Speaker. We are now debating specific bills. We are not debating the mid-year budget debate. That debate is finished. That was last week, Mr. Speaker, and the week before. But that is not the debate we're debating today, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member, respectfully, is debating as if he's debating the debate last week, not debate before this House today, Mr. Speaker. And I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, that the debater, the honourable member for Centerville, debate the bills that are before the House. Those are the rules. That's how we operate in the House, Mr. Speaker. As far as I'm aware, I don't think those rules have changed, Mr. Speaker. I'm not aware that those rules have changed, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Thank you, Speaker. I think the member, it's unfortunately does not see or agree the absolute relevance of what is being argued. As stated by the member for Exuma, the report on hurricane expenditure, the relief and the recovery, the unaudited, the audited report is yet to be laid contrary to the law. Now you bring in a bunch of new bills, which you say you're going to be laying for this parliament, which is going to bring some new standard. Your credibility is strained. I think the member is quite relevant, and he is saying that, you know, you're straining my credibility, you bring in all these fancy bills, and you've not even complied with the law in many respects.
Privilege one, please. Privilege one.
Honourable members, it is the ruling of the chair. Honourable members, it's the ruling of the chair that the references made by the member for Centerville falls within the Rule 3313 of the Rules of Procedure. It falls within Rule 3313. Carry on, honourable member for Centerville.
Carry on. Carry on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And
All privilege.
before I forget, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to adopt and say to you how much I appreciated your comments earlier this morning on the independence of the House and the way forward. As an MP, Mr. Speaker, I cherish the responsibility that I have for the people of Centerville because it was they that elected me. It had to be, Mr. Speaker, the people along with God. So I hold that responsibility sacred. I have given my voice to them, Mr. Speaker. However, if I'm ever given the pen, you will witness, they will witness a Centerville like no other. where generations will understand and feel the work of an independent mind. A legacy, Mr. Speaker, of people helping people, and an irreplaceable brand of courage, the audacity to believe in something bigger than this, something bigger than ourselves, something better for our children, something greater for our nation. Last time, Mr. Speaker, I spoke to this average of $7,000 per month versus 83 cents. The member for East End spoke about a 750% tax cut on the inner city. And I asked for quantification, and he said around $30 or something like that. 750% tax cut, $30? Come on, you can't use.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
It would be helpful if the member would stick to facts instead of interpreting what he thinks he heard. The point that I made was that on the bread basket items and on specific food items, as well as on electricity, on water, on private residential insurance, house insurance, that we reduced the VAT from 7.5% to 0. That is effectively a 750% decrease in the cost of those items. That's what at least with the tax on those items. That's what I said. And I went on to say, that if he wants to talk about the $30 thing, I said to him that if you were to speculate that the average house spent about $1,500 in taxable items that were previously tax-free, if the Progressive Liberal Party program comes into effect, and as I speculated, that they would have to eliminate all of the exemptions, then it would amount to about $30 additional per month. That's what I said.
Thank you, honorable member.
That is not what. That is not what I understood. The
Privilege one, you still speaking?
Mr. Speaker, I stood on a point of order and I asked the member to quantify the exemptions for the people over the hill. His response was $30, around $30 or something like that. So I don't know how he connected that with something else.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of
The
order.
member is being very misleading and irrational in his thought. How could I possibly have stood here on my feet and guesstimate, because it's the only thing I could do, for every house in Centerville, how much they spend, and give him a number on my feet? How is that possible? Let's be reasonable here. Pine Ridge, for Lord's sake. Come on, man. This is about serious business.
If you talk about it,
Mr. Speaker.
if you want to talk about the $30
Honorable member.
what is that?
With due respect, Mr. Speaker, if the member for Pine Ridge wants to speak to me, he can get to his feet. And we can talk. Right? We can debate. But get to his feet.
I get on my feet for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard that.
Honorable member for Centerville.
Tell me when to get on my feet.
Honorable member for Pine Ridge. Honorable member for Centerville. The member for East Grand Bahama is denying that he made any $30 reference with respect to your constituency. He's denying that. Are you able to substantiate that claim?
Mr. Speaker, it's in the, and if you may, and if I may ask for your indulgence, but I am sure, because that was the only point of which I stood during his presentation, was to ask for the quantification of the exemptions. And so if we could get the hands.
So we've already requested the hands
Great.
for his presentation, so we'll examine that at the same time.
Yes. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Speaker, I noticed the campaigning, F&M campaigning with the one-man band in Culmersville and Roll Avenue. But nobody told them, the people in Culmersville, that they don't get the same tax breaks as the others. You didn't tell them you're still taxing them. So they're not in that over-the-hill program, which I was advocating to include Culmersville and over the hill, but they didn't. So when you go in these constituencies, talk to the people, tell them you're taxing the wind out of their sail. That's what you tell them. So they went into Culmersville and didn't tell the people that they're being taxed. Make them feel like they over the hill. So we doing all of this and all of that for you. Did you tell Roll Avenue while you flood their streets with these red shirts and the possibility of COVID that they are not entitled to your tax breaks? That's what you should have been telling them. Selling them a bunch of red dreams that will be deferred, I suppose. A Bahamas for Bahamians, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
A Bahamas for us.
Yeah.
Just when did that become too much to ask? Was it 87? Was it 92? Was it 2002? Was it 2017? When did it become too much to ask? Mr. Speaker, the establishment did not expect me to beat PLP. It wasn't a part of their plans. They didn't know I wasn't running against a person. I was running against a system that wasn't working for the people of Centerville. A system that suppressed our elderly and exploited the minds of our at-risk youths. A system that miseducated our people and indulged in a political Ponzi of promises, hurt and pain, and all of the other vicissitudes of life. The choice is clear, Mr. Speaker. Centerville will unite and fight. A passion, Mr. Speaker, of sacred responsibility to our people. From Horatio Chipman in 1870 to H.N. Chipman in 1920, to Hubert Chipman in 2012, and now to Reese Chipman, an irreplaceable brand of people helping people, of people helping the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, Centerville supports these bills. It is about time the country puts a governance structure in place to manage the affairs of our people. Hopefully, the people of Centerville can benefit from this, from the implementation and from the compliance and enforcement of these bills. To the people of Centerville, you know who to vote for. We are voting for the freedoms and independence of our children. Parties have not done it. It is time to do it ourselves. God bless you, Mr. Speaker, the independent Speaker of this House. And God bless Centerville and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Speaker, no. I rise on behalf of the good people of the great constituency of St. Anne's and formerly Montague to make a very brief contribution to this budget, these compendium of bills today. It has been interesting to follow the last few speakers. And I'm trying to get out of my head the song, Dog Don't Bark at a Parked Cow. I first came to the Chamber of the Parliament, that I mentioned this morning, in 1987. At that time, the budget debate in the Senate was between Christmas and New Year's. And it was in the House between the last week of December. So the good members of this House, along with the support staff, the Ministry of Finance, were in their Christmas season in here debating the national budget. It was the FNM government under Hubert Ingram that moved that budget. We did it in an 18-month year, or was it whichever way, and moved the budget period to what we now have laying in May and going to the budget year starting July. F&M government. When you talk about a bill for an act to consolidate the law related to the management and control of public debt, and F&M government. When you talk about the procurement bill, and F&M government. When you talk about tightening the fiscal responsibilities of the Bahamas, a majority of the forward movement was the F&M government. When we came to government in 1992, there were 16, 15, 17 years of unaudited statements left behind that were never on the table. That's why I'm saying it. Some people weren't there, so they did not know. There were years, and there were years of unpaid bills. I mean, the persons from the finance department can tell you, BC bills that were unpaid for years. These bills, financial statements that were not tabled. And both the Ingram administration and following administrations did their best to bring those statements forward. There were years and years. And I'm not going to talk about the stranglehold the PLP put on the Public Accounts Committee, because we've talked about that in another debate. And that was another one. So the point I stood up here today is when members in here talk about the silly season, or whatever they want to call it, in the next year going to campaigning, it is a proven fact. And if people want to vote and judge the F&M by one person, one particular issue, they have brought financial accountability and transparency to the finances of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, not the other fellas. In the time that the F&M, since 1992, there has been more movement, forward movement, accountability, transparency, and putting into laws policies that the next government, the next government, whoever they are, will have to live by this. And I hope they've read it carefully, because there are you won't be the next government.
We have, you will see.
So we have, you can look there, and when you talk about all these various red herrings out there, one indisputable fact is that the F&M government has brought in the last 20 years more financial accountability and reform to this country than any other party. St. Anne supports the bills.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Angliston.
Thank you, Speaker.
Honourable Members, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Angliston.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise on behalf of the good people of Angliston. And I won't be long because just one or two things I want to talk about. I heard the member for St. Anne's about this myth that the Free National Movement has brought transparency and accountability, when in this very debate, we have been able to point to two instances where there has been severe failure. I think one of the most critical failures that the member for Exuma and Ragged Island raised, and it's a very serious one, and it is the fact that the Disaster Recovery Authority spent more than was allocated, has not properly accounted in this parliament. And you're talking now about transparency and accountability. Let's get real here. Listen, you could only sell a story for so long, There's some realities on the table. And the realities are very current, and they're the subject of conversation today in this House of Assembly. So when the member talks about how wonderful the Free National Movement is in these things, we have the bodies right here on the table in terms of where that is not the case, and where there has not been proper accounting to this country or to this House. The other point the member for Exuma and Ragged Island raised is the sinking fund. We all remember when this administration took office, they said a lot of things about what was happening and who spent the money and who do this and how we use money for our cronies, how we keep the VAT money. They said in the elections, and they said they were still looking for how we spent money. It turns out none of it was true. It was political rhetoric that was translated into budget speeches in this parliament that was not demonstrated factually, and it was a misleading of the Bahamian people. So this administration has no monopoly on anything of any high anything. No, they have no standing on this issue. And so when the member comes with that speech, I don't know who he's talking to, because there's a real world, and in this real world, that is not the track record of this administration, Speaker. And and I just want to say, because I heard the Prime Minister talk about the statistics bill, and I'm very, very happy that this bill has been brought. And it's one that was in the works. This administration met this as a work in progress because it was one that we were committed to. It's one that is long overdue. And you can't point the finger to anyone, because the Free National Movement in the last 20 years has been in government for 15 years. And so they have to take responsibility. So there's no sense coming in here trying to be the superior moral force in this country. It ain't working because no one believes it. But this bill is important. And it was one that the prior administration I think they had met a draft in place. And I think it's a very important piece of legislation, and long overdue, because when you make decisions, when you make policy, it has to be based on the substantive facts on the ground. I believe, we're one of the few countries that has not given the appropriate attention to the importance of data, empirical evidence in decision making. And as a result, politicians come to the country, they shoot from the hip, and you have policy, excuse me, policy that does not impact national development in a real way. One of the issues is public health. We have a crisis of chronic non-communicable diseases. But the minister, when I said this before, said, yes, we have a program. I ain't talking about no program. I'm talking about a situation where you have a crisis in health, a crisis where we are distinguishing ourselves with obesity, distinguishing ourselves with diabetes, distinguishing ourselves with hypertension, the amount of people on dialysis right now as we speak, and dialysis is horrible, Mr. Speaker, it's horrible. And the money that is spent from our taxes in supporting sick people in the hospital, more than half the beds of sick people. When you put those statistics on the table, don't tell me you got an exercise class with 20 people. We have a crisis of health. When you look at our education, you analyze what's happening. You look at the fact that just about half of our children do not finish high school, do not graduate. These are very important statistics. And maybe we're afraid to know the truth, but statistics are going to help us know the truth. I look forward to knowing the truth because I believe I have a very good sense of it. Look at the rate of violence in this country. I always talk about it. We have a serious problem with violence in this country, with guns and violence. In the world, the Bahamas, they tell us it's better in the Bahamas. We have tourism, we got the nice beach and all that. But behind the scenes, we got a problem with violence. So I am very happy that that this bill has surfaced, and that it will begin a process of scientifically understanding what is happening in this country and finding policy that responds to it. When the Prime Minister spoke about this bill, and it's similar to what Finance just tried to do, he said this bill, the law at the time was born in 1973. It had no this, it had no that, it lacked this, it lacked that, it lacked the next thing. Well, it might have, but you're talking about 50 years ago. It was groundbreaking. And you should give due where it is, because see, this propaganda that I keep hearing by this administration, that you have been the saviors of the Bahamian people, nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. And you have to come to a place of acceptance. And most countries do this, They have regard for the founding fathers of a nation. They were imperfect in any country. Go to any country and they are all imperfect. The white ones and the black ones. Okay? All imperfect. But we have to come to the place where we got to stop this tribalism, this joking and chopping about how the Bahamian people have traveled from the Middle Passage to sitting in this house today. We have to stop this. And I want to encourage the government, go to the next level of dialogue, man. Bahamian people say, my dog better than your dog. They're not interested in that. What they are interested in is how we are able to advance the cause of our people. The member for Centerville talked about the fact that people are living in cars. We know that. We all know. We walk outside this parliament right now, and we've been stopped over. No, people are living. We know that, and we know that the minimum wage of one wage earner in a house puts a severe strain. So let's face reality. The Bahamian people want to know what is on offer to take them out of a misery into a palatable reality. That is what they're asking for. So please spare us in this house from this mundane dialogue that we keep hearing in here, because it's boring, it's insulting, and you're not taking the people forward, because we got crisis after crisis after crisis. And good governance, one, acknowledges it, and the statistics bill to help us with that. And good governance has sound policy that begins the remediation of all of our issues. I call it a redemption situation. That's why we are here. So I'm happy to see this legislation. And these are some very thick bills. And I think that the point that we've been trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that if you have no credibility on the smaller bills, imagine bills like this, where you don't have the infrastructure. And, it has even been suggested that this is being brought as part of a public relations exercise and elections. I think you said it's the bill's been on the table for a year, eh? Which one? With the procurement one. And in the meantime, you've been giving out all kinds of contracts, but you ain't enact that law. If you enacted that law, we could have governed how you're giving out them contracts. But you didn't do that. You kept it on the table. Where is it? You find this big bill right here. For a year, you had it on this table. But now we know all the signals are election. We saw the Prime Minister in Centerville the other day, yesterday or Saturday. He made some comments about the members on this side. I will not stoop to responding, because I certainly know that a prime minister has to, no matter, you could have the rally talk, as he puts it, but you got to maintain a standard for the same people. When you go below it, there's a problem. And it's happened before in our country. And most prime ministers who might have felt that they went there, they apologize. So I'm still waiting. I believe the prime minister can do the right thing. He's going to come in here and apologize to members opposite. Because the people of Angleton, they know what they were doing. They sent this member here. Cat Island know what they were doing. Exuma know what they were doing. And Golden Isles knew what they were doing. So, and I don't believe I don't believe that I bring a negative to my national reality. That is but I wouldn't get into that because I don't really want to waste my time with that. But Mr. Speaker, so we we support the legislation. We don't believe this administration has any credibility on it. They've sat on it. We believe they're bringing it now because they want to sell this story, this song, that they are this thing. But the facts show they're not that thing. And so I urge the Bahamian people, to take this with a grain of salt, so that we don't get too distracted. There's some real issues on the table, and we should bring attention to those issues, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say, as on the statistics bill, that when it was brought 50 years ago, it was groundbreaking. It was the change, and I talked about this last week or whenever it was on the budget debate. It was the structural reform of how we saw our nationhood. And so we must give due respect to our foundation. A people without a foundation are useless. A people without a foundation are weak. A people without a foundation are lost. And I want to encourage the Free National Movement government, stop trying to encourage us to believe we are people without a foundation. We have a foundation. And I urge them to acknowledge it. It don't make you less powerful as a government. It don't make you less FNM. It don't make us more anything, except that we're proud to have that legacy on this side of the house. I'm very proud of that. But let us be honest and truthful about our history and about those who gave their lives for this country, men and women. whose shoes, may I say, none of us could probably fill. So catch yourself, man, and stop it. Catch yourself, Speaker. Speaker, I just want to, before I take my seat, I wanted to pay tribute to someone who was also alluded to by the member for Exuma and Ragged Island as an Exumian, but he didn't know this important part of it. Mr. Leonard Skeeter Dames lived in the Angliston constituency for many years in the Grove. And I knew he was a stalwart counselor and one of the great warriors of his era and of his time. He was very close with Finlay. I'm beginning to understand why he was so close, because one of his children shared with me his little bio on his sporting activities. And bear in mind now, he was 92. So you're talking back probably in the 40s or maybe in the 30s. Yes, the 40s and maybe late 30s. and maybe into the 50s. But if I could just share this in the record, Mr. Speaker, because I think this is really, I didn't know this about him. He was at a school called Smith School, which is now known as C.R. Walker. And at that time, he won the 220 yards in 24.4 seconds. And he beat two interesting people. One was Lyndon Pindling, who was the second, and the third was one James Fernando. And then he was so fast, they called him Mosquito. And that is how he came to be known as Skeeter Dames. And he was well admired and respected for his athletic ability. And then he matriculated to the Southern Primary School, which is now Stephen Dillett. And he continued in these duels with Pindling, with the 100 yards, where he defeated Pindling in 1948. No, Pindling defeated him in 1948, but that was the only time, they said. He expanded his career and he competed with the Southern Athletic Club. And he joined such legendaries described at the time as Lyndon Pindling, Cyril Peepside Johnson, Walter Taylor, Harcourt Bastian, Dennis Fernanda, and Sidney Wilson, who's the one of the shoe repairman, and Harold Munnings, who became permanent secretary. And which is amazing. These high accomplished Bahamians were also great athletes. And they said that this summary tells me that such a prolific group of sprinters dominated their events in the early 50s. So much so that the Southern Athletic Club won the championship won championship after championship at the district level. And then in 1953, they said he saw his finest hour when he was when there was a meet that the top Jamaican sprinter, Keith Gardner, who went on to distinguish himself internationally, came. Skeeter, in the premier event, Gardner held off a fast closing Dames, this is sound like sports talk here, to win the event in 9.6 seconds. And that sounds fast. Dames continued his dominance in the 220 yards, winning that event in 23.3 seconds to defeat Bernice Bunny Albury and Errington Rinky Isaacs, who happened to be a cousin of mine. Dames earned the right to be named in this country's first national track and field team. He was on the first national track and field team. He was selected to represent the Bahamas at the British Empire and Commonwealth Games in 1954 in British Columbia in the province of Vancouver. And at that championship, he was among a 4-member team that was selected to represent the Bahamas. He was joined by sprinter Errington Isaacs, middle distance winner Peepside Johnson, and team manager Cyril Richardson. At the games, Dames recorded his personal best in both short sprints, but did not advance to the finals in either. A year later, in 1955, he gave a young and lauding Tommy Robinson his only defeat on Bahamian soil, relegating him to second place in the 100 yards, with Cyril Paul finishing in third place. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to remember this outstanding Bahamian. That is why, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Yeah. It tells you. One of the members sitting there across there said he didn't know that Tinling was an athlete, but you know, yeah, he was, you know, and Mr. Speaker, I always say this, right? And it's not because I just want to repeat it, but because the more and more I move through my life, I learn how true it is. Marcus Garvey says, a people without knowledge of their origin, history, and culture are like a tree without roots. And I'm serious. It tells you, see, if we were to understand that fundamental premise nationally, we wouldn't try to rewrite history every second, number one. Just accept the facts. You distinguish yourself. You can never match. Can I just say, Mr. Speaker, nobody will ever match the original one because they made it happen. They formed the defense force when there was nothing. They formed the central bank. They built the schools when there was one public school. They built the clinics and allowed for access to people everywhere. You're never going to get beyond that. Just accept it and build on it. It doesn't make you a lesser person to accept your history, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, see, listen to this noise.
Honorable members.
Oh, no. So, Mr. Speaker, know your history. Know your history, Mr. Speaker. Know your history. And the history even predates the Progressive Liberal Party. Know your history. Because the more you understand the journey, the more no one would come in here and waste time talking light stuff. Because we have a nation that requires serious attention. That's the reality. It's hard work and it's complex. And the type of dialogue, I want to guarantee we got elections, it seems. All of us at the table, because we all on the ground, I'm sure. Trust me, the Bahamian people are not into superficialities. They ain't buying no narrative. They ain't listening to no song because they see what time it is. Now, we might not face it. And you know something? They don't even need a statistics bill to know that. They know what time it is. They know what time, but they know. That's the emotional intelligence. Bahamians have emotional intelligence. There's a reason, you know, we have the highest, we're amongst the nations with the highest turnout of voters in the world. In the world. Not in the region. Jamaica had the lowest the other day. The Bahamas has high turnout of voters. The highest in the world. Amongst the highest in the world. And so that tells you volumes for the people. They ain't doing it because they're doing an outing on that day. They doing that because they love their country. They invested in it. And they gonna have a voice as that this thing, most times they're saying this thing gotta stop. That's what they're saying most of the time. This got to stop. And so we have to appreciate that the people are highly intelligent, intuitive people when it comes to their country. And so, Mr. Speaker, I take my seat and to say that, you know, we would urge the government to bring that Freedom of Information Act that you've been sitting on for 4 years. Your credibility gone on that. You campaigned on that. Actually, talking about that, Mr. Speaker, I got 9 minutes, but something else I want to say. I invite Bahamians to pass by Bay Street anytime of the day or night and look at the barricades in the square. I have never seen that on a sustained, continuous basis. The square has now become unimpeachable for Bahamians, the People's Square. This is the same government where the Prime Minister went, then leading opposition in his black We March shirt, march on Bay Street and saying, this is the People's Square. Remember when he said that? But it ain't the People's Square no more? And you think you got credibility on all these big books? You don't. And this is the same Prime Minister that went over Paradise Island Bridge, where the people bust down the fence, where they blocked up the road, where they had little scuffles and fights and people were charged. That Prime Minister. But you look out there right now. Barricades. For me to get out of this house right now, a police officer has to make a special provision to create a breach to allow me to leave this parliament. This speaks volumes. about the hypocrisy of this administration. The hypocrisy. And I want the Bahamian people to see, and the thing is, when the Prime Minister was in Centerville, you know, he sort of, like, in my view, he sort of lost the official narrative, and I think he showed some things about himself when he spoke about the members on this side. I want to urge him to apologize, because I don't want to go after him or attack him on that. No, I'd like him to apologize so I could forgive him and move on. And then we could put ourselves together and just go and defeat him at the polls. But I don't want to put too much emotion and fire in me, because he had an unjustified and unwarranted and a below the belt attack on members opposite. And so, Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to remove those barricades. That's an act of transparency right there. That's an act of accountability. Let's begin to, let us not sing one song and then dance to another one. The Bahamian people pick up on that. They see it, they know it. And I want to urge them, when the politicians are singing, don't worry about what they're singing. Watch how they dancing. And right now, it was the people's time, but the people can't even enter this parliamentary square. It is the first time I have seen that. You know, the UBP, I don't think ever did that. UBP never did that. Hubert Ingram never did that. But the one who tells us it's the people's time, Mr. Speaker, that one, he has now barricaded this Parliament Square, Mr. Speaker. So I urge him to remove those barricades. Let the people of this country, of free people, we are free. Let the free people walk through the square from point A to point B. Let them hail their parliamentarians. Are we changing that now? You can't talk to your parliamentarians no more outside the House, Speaker? Anyway, Mr. Speaker, today I celebrate the life of Leonard Skeeter Dames, a great man. I pray that his family will be strengthened in this painful time, but they have much to celebrate in terms of a life well lived and just really a spectacular and beautiful life. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Isles.
Speaker, I'm thankful, grateful to Almighty God for this opportunity to stand in this hallowed place. It's historic, to speak, to stand on behalf of the people who have made it possible for me to be here. The residents, the constituents of the great Golden Isles constituency. Mr. Speaker, I shall be brief in support of the compendium of bills before us. And like most persons have done, divert just a little, Mr. Speaker. In this honorable House, there are rules, there are regulations, guidelines regarding the language that a member ought to use referring to other members. I understand, Mr. Speaker. After sitting in this honorable place for the past 4 years, approximately, I've learned, Mr. Speaker, that to refer to members as contaminants, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, is improper, inappropriate, insulting, degrading, and disrespectful. I would dare say even unparliamentary. Contaminant, Mr. Speaker, defined as a polluting or poisonous substance. Mr. Speaker, that the member for Kalani, the Honorable Prime Minister, would choose to do just that over the weekend during a walkabout in the Centerville constituency, in my opinion, was most dishonorable. It was an insult, Mr. Speaker, to all of those citizens who over the years have supported the Progressive Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker. And so to do that, again, Mr. Speaker, was most distasteful and dishonorable. How, Mr. Speaker, can it be explained that the most honorable...
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
Speaker, I hate to see the honorable member just getting warmed up. He's spoken for member's spoken for more than 3 minutes and said absolutely nothing about the bills that we debate. Nothing. Nothing, Mr. Speaker. Nothing.
Honorable members. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Ramkey, and San Salvador.
Speaker. Michael, sat there and listen to the member from Grand Bahama vilify me, insulting me. He sat there. And he knows, and I could have said some things. He said nothing about it for more than half an hour.
He was eating popcorn. He had popcorn.
Speaker,
The chair recognizes Carmichael.
the Speaker for the Speaker, when comments may have been made that related to the member opposite and to myself, I was not here for a good portion of that time. But we're not speaking about things that were said in here, Mr. Speaker. We're not speaking about comments like cockroaches that were issued in this place. We're speaking about something that was said away from here. And it would be good if we could, if we really, see, Mr. Speaker, if we really take what Anglison said seriously, when she speaks about our forefathers, and when she speaks about elevating the debate, and when she speaks about us looking to them, and looking to the past, and looking to the honorable men and women who came before us. That is what we're here to debate, and that's what the Bahamian people want to hear us say. That's what they want to hear us address. So, Mr. Speaker, I've been here. I've seen many things. I think my colleagues will understand that I'm one of those who try to elevate the debate. I try very hard to do that. It would be good if we could speak on issues that are before this place, not on something that happened in Centerville on the weekend.
Mr. Speaker, as I started to say, Mr. Speaker, how can it be explained that the member for Kalani, the most honorable Prime Minister, employed abusive, dishonest language when referring to his opponents? I wish to remind all of us, members of Parliament, that when the mace was thrown out of the House by the father of our nation, the late Sir Lyndon Oscar, Right Honorable Sir Lyndon Oscar Findlay, that he declared that day, Mr. Speaker, that the Parliament belonged to the people, and the people were outside. Mr. Speaker, I contend, therefore, that whatever is unparliamentary language in this House, Mr. Speaker, that we ought to govern ourselves accordingly, particularly when we are referring to each other in language that's considered parliamentary. Abusive personal attacks by one member against another is taboo inside, and Mr. Speaker, inappropriate outside. There is no excuse, Mr. Speaker, particularly for the leader of our country. There is no excuse for him to have been insulting in that manner. Mr. Speaker, therefore, I call on him to recant, to repent, and to apologize not only to the members on this side, but also to the good people of Centerville and to Bahamians at large. From Grand Bahama to Inagua, from Bimini and the Berry Islands to Mayaguana. We must elevate the level of our conversation and the language we use. And that's not just for that side, Mr. Speaker, that's for all of us. Because I've heard some other language from some other quarters that was disgusting also. So I speak to all of us in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, this is not the kind of inflammatory language that is required, Mr. Speaker, at this critical time in dealing with the serious issues created by the pandemic emergency. Mr. Speaker, the nation needs sober, the nation needs respectful, the nation needs intelligent discourse at this time to foster a sense of national unity. The Bahamian electorate, the Bahamian voter, being highly capable of dealing with the issues of the day, do not need insulting and inflammatory language to make decisions. There is no need, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, therefore, to create the kind of atmosphere in the name of politics, in the name of campaigning, in the name of the silly season time. There's no need, Mr. Speaker, to create the atmosphere for a cussing match between F&M and the PLP and any other group or organization. The country deserves better. The country demands better. And the country should get better. We need, Mr. Speaker, as persons who have been elected to serve at this level, if we are going to mature politically, the leadership in that direction, I believe, must come from us who sit in this honorable House. Honorable men and women, Mr. Speaker, must act like honorable men and women, must speak like honorable men and women. And we must, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, address each other like honorable men and women should. So, Mr. Speaker, again, those remarks, uncalled for, most disgusting, inflammatory. And again, Mr. Speaker, Golden Isle support the legislation. the Almighty God continue to bless Commonwealth of the Bahamas and make the wealth common. Golden Isles rest.
Thank you, honorable member.
Lenny, Chair recognizes the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I move into my contribution today, I wish to lend my voice to the chorus of praises and condolences to the family of Alex Peter Day, an iconic exomian who made many of us proud, whose legendary exploits in athletics, particularly sprint, have been well known and well documented. I also like to extend condolences to the four young persons who lost their lives in the boating accident near to Harbour Island last evening. Candice McDonald, who is known to us being the fiancée of one of our young liberals, Deanna Cartwright, and Jay Roberts. It was a tragic accident, and we say to the families of these deceased persons that lean not on your understanding and understand that that is what was perhaps their destiny. And we know that the Lord will be there to console them in this their hour of bereavement. And may they all and their souls rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, last week I began my contribution to the debate on the mid-budget statement by speaking to the challenges of these difficult times. On the occasion of this debate, once again, Mr. Speaker, I said that the Bahamians deserve to be told the truth about the depth and breadth of the present economic crisis and to hear from the government how they plan to lead the country out of it. Now, more so than ever, Mr. Speaker, words matter. Words that mean what they say, words that convey the full intentions of the government, and words that do not camouflage difficult truths in phrases that amount to what one writer once called double speak. Mr. Speaker, the presentation of the compendium of financial bills provides yet another opportunity, or provided yet another opportunity, for the government to use its words wisely and well. It is clear that the government does not have an economic plan such as we have, and even if they had a plan that did not rise to the moment as ours does, at this stage, any plan by them at all would be welcomed by the Bahamian people. Even so, they could still demonstrate the kind of competent handling of the economy that would give comfort to lenders, the international markets, and the Bahamians alike. Gladly, the Public Finance Management Bill, the Procurement Bill, the Statistics Bill, and the Public Debt Management Bill must be viewed for what they are. We support them, but let's view them for what they are, and not what the government claims they might be. Again, words matter, Mr. Speaker, and these bills represent what I perceive and believe to be a last-ditch effort by this administration to convince the Bahamian public and the country's creditors that the present administration is concerned about modernizing the organs of the government and improving fiscal transparency and accountability. But you heard the member from Senator who exposed the lack of fiscal transparency and accountability. You heard the member from Exuma speak to the lack of fiscal transparency and accountability. So I will not recount those. The government clearly believes that the passage of these bills perhaps will, and we are aware that funding is required. Most of these fundings are, and they have signed some loan agreements, and there's a need for these funds to be released. So I believe that, or they believe that the passage of these bills will release these fundings on the various loan agreements which they have recently executed. They are walking, though, a legislative tightrope to do so. The loan agreements with the multilateral financial institutions, if you look at them, they are referred to as policy-based loans, which is a nice way to say they require structural adjustment, hence these bills. In other words, the development priorities of this government appear on the face of it. And from what we can see and reading the tea leaves, that they're being driven by external forces. Of course, as would be expected given the country's poor fiscal state. So instead of bringing legislation which would strengthen the government's administration of revenue and collection, or improve the country's response to COVID-19, the administration is bringing legislation so esoteric that most members of parliament and senior civil servants have no idea of the impact of these reforms, much like the fiscal responsibility legislation they previously passed, which remains practically unenforceable. We have heard the member for Exuma speak to this. This is not to say that some elements of the legislation are not useful. This is not to say that some elements of the legislation are not useful. The compendium does include many elements which might be expected. In fact, most of the preparatory work that was undertaken to bring the compendium to Parliament was carried out by a PLP administration. That said, these reforms, as presented, are not ready. But this is a decision that's been made by the government. It's policy, and therefore we will not stand in their way of policy decision. But we warn that these reforms, as is, will create havoc in the Bahamian public service for years to come, unless, as I perceive, some amendments are made to make the compendium conform to the reality of the Bahamian administration. And again, the member from Exuma spoke to some of these matters. Mr. Speaker, not a single one of the agencies impacted by this compendium has a permanent head of agency. And that should tell you something. Who has the statistics of that? We're talking about the procurement management team. We speak about the debt management. Who would be heading these things? So there's no, the legislation is complete. But what efforts have been made to date to ensure that the proper personnel are in place to see the implementation of these bills, and who would be there to, as it were, impart the knowledge to the civil service as to how these bills are going to impact their day-to-day operation. As I said, there's no one in post who has to live with the implications of what is being proposed. And to me, this signals to me that the process is being rushed by external considerations. And the good governance of the Bahamas will suffer because of it. I shall take each bill in turn. The Financial Audit Administration Act. That act is being replaced now with three separate pieces of legislation: the Public Financial Management Bill, the Public Debt Bill, and the Procurement Bill. They basically retain the framework for reform that was started under and agreed by an earlier PLP administration. The Public Financial Management Bill codifies many of the existing practices of the Ministry of Finance and the wider public service, borrowing heavily from the old Financial Administration and Audit Act of 1973. So they're reintroducing some of those provisions that were in place from 1973. Of course, it appears that the Financial Secretary provided expansive authority with respect to gathering fiscal information from statutory bodies. I note, though, that the list of the statutory bodies is incomplete as set out in the bill, and there may be some conflict with other sections of financial legislation as relate to some of these statutory bodies, and perhaps attention needs to be paid to that. I note that there is a section 3 of that bill that speaks to the primacy of the act, which may help to solve those conflicts, right? Because that provision speaks to the act being the act in relation to any matters that may conflict with any other law. But it would have been more useful and helpful as an instrument to at least identify and make the accompanying or the consequential amendments to various laws that used to follow. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the very curious features in this bill, for me, is the change of the name of the Treasury Department. This was the two alluded to by the member from Exuma. The oldest department in the government, right, to that of Accountant General Department. Why is this? What is the purpose behind the casual abolition of a significant part of our historical and constitutional tradition? You know, if you follow the Westminster system, I think they used to call them the Lord High Treasurer. That was the name of the then Prime Minister. And so Treasurer had a very long historical meaning in the Westminster system. And, you know, I would think twice before I just very sleight of hand, partially abolish that word treasurer, that the nomenclature treasurer. But so I ask the question. Much more problematic is the fact that many elements of this bill are simply not enforceable. Without a thorough education program within the wider public sector, compliance will be low. It prompts the question I raised earlier. Is this a genuine attempt at reform or a rushed attempt to satisfy the government's lenders that it is doing something to make structural improvements. Mr. Speaker, the final point I make in respect to this bill impacts on the operation of this honorable House. By outlining the functions of the Public Accounts Committee in the bill, this proposed legislation conflicts with the convention, the Westminster Convention of the Separation of Powers. The executive is not entitled to dictate the work of Parliament. And
Which section is that, Mr. Kalana?
Huh?
What section of the bill is that? The point you just raised.
I don't have it in this note, but I could find it for you. I could find it for you. The PAC. And someone spoke to that as well. Right, so you are dictating through legislation, the executive is not entitled to dictate the work of Parliament. And I think Section 71. 75. Thank you very much. And so, on the face of it, I don't know whether this provision will likely survive a challenge in the court. If the government is serious about making this legislation work, they should table the associated regulations and guidance notes to ensure that they are workable. That would also help us in contributing intelligently to the various provisions of these bills. So I may not have to say that provisions are not workable or enforceable if one would have been able to appreciate what the associated regulations may have been and what guidance notes may be issued as a result of those provisions. Once again, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, words do matter. In the Procurement Bill, the overall purpose of this bill is to modernize the procurement process within the wider public sector, not just central government. Therein lies some challenges. All government entities will be included in this. The central feature of the bill is meant to be a procurement board staffed by independent professionals. What is the point, Mr. Speaker? To have, as the government now proposes, a board of decision makers selected mostly, almost entirely by the Prime Minister, if it's going to be independent. The purpose of the board is not to make procurement decisions, but rather to make sure that the rules of procurement are followed. I shall say it again. The purpose of the board is not to make procurement decisions, but rather to make sure that the rules of procurement are followed. Leading a board of political appointees reflects a lack of understanding on how the system should work, in my view. Right? I question whether an interpretation of the legislative regime now being set up, which is rule-based, whether it's lessening the involvement of cabinet in procurement decisions. Is it really the intention of this administration to say that the elected representatives of the people, accountable to the people and Parliament, are to be sidelined in favor of a group of people appointed by the Prime Minister? This just doesn't make sense, and will certainly not lead to the kind of better governance that the Bahamian people want or need. These proposals would create a huge bureaucracy with a dangerous amount of unaccountable power. So without the regulations and guidance notes again in respect to this bill, on the face of it, this is simply unworkable and would lead to significant bureaucratic delays. The government clearly has not consulted, or let me put it another way, what we advised earlier, that this was wide consultation, that these bills were sent to me and others, and we made no input to it. Well, I may have been contacted. It would have fallen through the cracks, maybe. I don't recall. No. I'm not going to. But what I'm saying is that, I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, right? All I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that the operations of government are such that if we knew the regulations and guidance notes that would accompany this bill, we would have been able to address what we consider these flaws that would not have made it, and we would have expected that we might have been able to identify flaws and be more constructive be more able to intelligently debate this bill. Again, in this bill, the words here grant far-reaching powers with unforeseen consequences. The Public Debt Bill, an important part of the Financial Administration Act, was the limits it set on government's borrowing. These limits have been incorporated in the Fiscal Responsibility Act in terms of debt limits, which follows the American model of debt management. The Public Debt Bill is a continuation of this body. With this legislation, there would be no need, it appears, and is questionable. Why do you still have to come to Parliament for approval for loans and guarantees and no set limits? And there are no set limits on short-term debt borrowing. So there's that question. What is the role of Parliament in respect to the loan? When you consider the terms of the and provisions of the public debt bill. I think this puts the country on a potentially dangerous path. When you consider that the new Central Bank Act prevents the government from borrowing from the central bank in a normal course of business for a country with an undeveloped capital market. This increases funding costs to the government and creates, in my view, an unnecessary fiscal pressure, the manner in which the legislature is going to stick with the debt, with the public debt bill. Mr. Speaker, with the statistics bill, work on this bill was funded by an IDB loan that was executed by the previous PLP administration. This bill seeks to give the Department of Statistics operational independence. I would like to remind the House, as we were reminded by the member for Engliston, that this was a feature created by the PLP. And yes, when it was created, that was what was necessary at that time. And that's many years ago. And yes, improvements are required. And this bill does do that. So while we support a desire to strengthen and improve the organization, this bill, in my view, does not address the critical issue of funding. Without independent access to funding, the new statistical institute would never be independent. The stated purpose of this bill cannot be achieved. It will remain a fact of life that he who pays the piper calls the tune. I would just like to put on record that the Statistical Institute, as a body, should be about developing and maintaining community trust, which is fundamental to our ability to collect high-quality information. It should be about enabling effective and safe use of our statistics. It should be about coordinating and advising official bodies on statistics, including developing and ensuring compliance with statistical standards, and to ensure confidentiality. Mr. Speaker, throughout this address, I thank the member for Golden Isles, who, instead of using the word, language, talk about the language in this case. So this address, though, I've emphasized the fact that words matter. I've done so in respect of this debate to emphasize to the government that they must be frank in communicating to the Bahamian people exactly what these bills are and the effect they will have on the operation of government and the public service. Some of the elements of the proposed legislation raise constitutional issues, while others conflict with existing legislation. Other elements are simply unworkable given the reality of the administration of the public finances in the Bahamas. I would hope that the draft could advise the government how these issues could be addressed through regulations and guidance notes, which we don't have, and hopefully we'll be able to contribute to that. But, Mr. Speaker, I emphasize the importance regarding use of language for wider reasons. Words are taken especially seriously in this honorable House because they are the substance of the debate. You know, Mr. Speaker, traditionally, in House of Parliament, the Westminster Parliament, there's a fixture that we sit at least 18 feet apart. We don't do it here. But if you go historically talk about how members sit in chambers, so you're supposed to be 18 feet apart. You know, that symbolizes the sword. And so that, you know, that these swords then apart. And you know why that is? Because that's to signify that democracy mandates the use of words and not swords. Members are automatically referred to as honorable because they are presumed by the mere fact of the election to present themselves here as honorable women and men. Mr. Speaker, members on the government side increasingly seem to object in the most insulting ways when my colleagues and I raise matters of fact that they do not like. By contrast, we do not insult them. We don't call them names. We comport ourselves in ways which we consider that dignifies our honorable position. Mr. Speaker, I was deeply disappointed, therefore, when the honorable member for East Grand Bahama, the former Minister of Finance, chose to close last week's debate by politicizing and making personal attacks on my choice of healthcare in dealing with my COVID-19 infection. I appreciate that the honorable gentleman is going through a very difficult time. I appreciate that. But having not previously had a chance to respond properly in respect of his comments, Mr. Speaker, I say now that words matter. I have no personal quarrel with him. I would expect that at the very least, at a time when I was facing some sober health challenges, he would understand that I would heed the advice of my daughter, an outstanding medical specialist in the United States, and travel to a hospital where she would play a more significant part in my medical care. It remains one of my proudest achievements that I've raised a daughter who's gone on to excel on the world stage, who in my hour of need has the personal authority and professional regard among her peers to make such a determination. She remains my pride and joy. And if I ever face medical challenges again, I'd once again rely on her excellent advice and judgment. I expect, that every father in the country will do the same. So to characterize my decision as cowardly or an expression of a lack of faith in our local healthcare system is, as I said in my point of order, despicable. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what it's like to be forced to resign, or to be humiliated by my own prime minister. But it is not me who has accused the honorable gentleman of anything. It is not me who forced him to withdraw from his campaign, thus ending his political career. However, in this place, remains to me an honorable gentleman. And for whatever little time he remains in this honorable place, I'll continue to afford him every courtesy of his office. I would thank him, therefore, to choose his words carefully, because words matter. In a similar vein, Mr. Speaker, over the weekend, the Prime Minister was caught on camera rallying his troops by referring to us members of the opposition as contaminants. Mr. Speaker, he was so pleased with his choice of words that he repeated it. The political season is upon us. But on any definition, this is the most dehumanizing way in which to refer to any human being, let alone a political opponent. History teaches us the dangers and risks of this kind of language. When you get to the point where you consider your political opponent less than human, it gives license and incitement for them to be treated in ways which are less than human. History shows it, Mr. Speaker. Where does it end? Violent concentration camps and gas chambers. I choose my words carefully. Words matter, and the hatred and contempt which infuse the Prime Minister's words for the democratically elected opposition party, these words are deeply shocking and have no place in politics in the Bahamas. As with the former Minister of Finance, I appreciate that the Prime Minister is facing enormous challenges.
1 more minute, Kedah.
Thank you. Some of which go back a few years. I don't know what it feels like to arrive in this honorable house, then a few words later find out that you have been unceremoniously dumped as leader of the opposition and replaced by another, of course. I don't know what it's like to run an administration as uncaring, incompetent, and as corrupt as it is. But even with these challenges, suffice to say, Mr. Speaker, even in the dying days of his administration, he also remains to me an honorable gentleman. The campaign that me and my party engaged against him during the coming election will not stoop to such dehumanizing levels in practice. Where language such as that used by the Prime Minister is part of a campaign. We have already made a formal complaint to Facebook about his party's use of anonymous attacks and slurs on social media. As I say, Mr. Speaker, words matter. Whether it is in speaking to the state of the public finances, the plans to move the country forward, or in political debate, words matter. Because, Mr. Speaker, the truth matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cat Island, Rum Kansas. As many, the chair recognizes the member for Yamakroa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Here the conclusion of it all, Mr. Speaker, of the whole matter. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, after all that has been said and done in this honorable place, I'm not going to be very long. We have an agreement by both sides, inclusive of the independent members of this honorable house, that we have an agreement, Mr. Speaker, by both sides and members opposite, that the bills, the compendium of bills laid before this honorable house, and they are the Public Debt Management Bill, the Public Finance Management Bill, 2021, the Public Procurement Act, 2021, and the Statistics Bill, 2021, that we agree on. We agree, Mr. Speaker, that they are conventional. We agree that they are timely. Nobody will fault me for saying that we agree that the persons or the individuals are experts at the Ministry of Finance, including the former Deputy Prime Minister and others, would have done an exceptional job, Mr. Speaker, in putting these legislations together. We agree, Mr. Speaker, that there was comprehensive consultation locally and internationally on these bills, Mr. Speaker. And so we agree them. We agree the provisions. I hear the member for Kid Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador indicating earlier this morning, I think there was some notification by him that there was no consultation, but there is. I've been provided with information that as early as 2019, Wednesday 16, 2019, the Public Procurement Bill was sent to the member of the Kid Island, the Statistics Bill, and these bills have been laid publicly for all on sundry to have an opportunity to the Speaker to remonstrate, to discuss, to debate, and make proposals on these bills. But I want to wholeheartedly say on behalf of the government that we appreciate, respect, and admire the intestinal fortitude and the diligence of Bahamian professionals in compiling these bills to have them brought here in the context of COVID-19 to have this debate. Mr. Speaker, in truth and in fact, words do matter. And the way we say them, it matters. Mr. Speaker. I want to commend the member for Golden Isles when he spoke about repentance, Mr. Speaker. And some things that are said, some things that are not said, things that are done. And whether we overtly, tacitly, or impliedly support these things, it is wrong. Mr. Speaker, I would like to identify a member of my community that I had an opportunity to meet just prior to the 2017 general elections in the person of Mr. Clint Watson. I had the opportunity to visit with Mr. Watson and his family. And on Saturday past, I was afforded that opportunity to visit with Mr. Watson again. And we identified things that are said in the context of a person who have family, children, and live in the community. I think we all have an obligation, a strong obligation, to ensure in a small community that what is said and is done in your for the betterment of the community. I listened to Kid Island as he said that words matter. And I do recall an interview when Kid Island was given the opportunity to speak directly to the abuse of women and children. And rather than doing that, he said he's concentrating on an election while, well, I know all of us. Pardon me? He was given in one. I could send you a copy of the interview that you did. And they asked if you knew a certain gentleman. And you said, who? And you remember that? You don't? Okay. And so I would have thought on that occasion that when putting words to action, that he was spoken to, as I did, as others did, and I've called upon for the protection of women and children. Then, you know, if it is that someone is alleged to have done something, you give them the benefit of the doubt, but speak up on those issues. So, Mr. Speaker, simply put, these bills here today have been agreed, no matter what you heard today. We've agreed them. We think that they're conventional. They speak to transparency and accountability in government. So when you look at public debt management, an excellent bill, and I commend those all on sundry for the work that they've done. The public finance management bill and these bills speak to conflict of interest, confidentiality, and how do we put structures in place to look after the public finance of the Bahamian people. And when I started my debate this morning, I looked at the 17 sustainable goals. And I looked at directed all and sundry's attention to the Constitution of the Bahamas. And no matter what structure that is set up, whether it be the House, Senate, the Governor General, the entire structure is designed to protect people and to ensure that the proper facilities are put in place so that we can meet their needs, those needs that are I highlighted in the hierarchy of needs. And I also took this Honorable House, or invited this Honorable House to look at the first schedule of the Statistics Bill, to identify and I spoke to the importance of the gathering of statistics. And I do have an appreciation for the past and for all the nuances of the past that has brought us where we are today. And as Angleston said, we're not perfect. That's why I had the opportunity to say on the last occasion when speaking about the father of the nation that say what you like, do what you like. So Lyndon has all of us going his way. But you don't selectively use his name when it's convenient to you, as was mentioned in one of the dailies. So, Mr. Speaker, without further ado, on behalf of the good people of Yamacraw, I support this bill, second this bill. I crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, just to speak about where we are. This morning I had the opportunity to listen and watch the international news and see what is happening in the US, see what's happening in Brazil. They're building condominium above ground for the dead body. And when they showed an aerial view of the graveyard, you saw hundreds. They said that at least 80% of the capacity of all of their hospitals are at least at 80% capacity, and some running at full capacity, and that any number of persons.
1 second, Yamacraw. Before the speaker comes in, I also wish from this position to give my condolences to Mr. Dames and Exuma. I hear the member for Cat Island and the member for Exumas and Ragged Island speak to their lives. Mr. Dames would have been, I think, my stepfather's brother. So I want to say that Dolly and all of them in Exuma, my condolences. Also, very important, another icon in the Exumas, Ms. Veronica Marshall. I think her funeral will be this weekend. I wish to give her my condolences. She was my mother, my grandmother in Exuma when I was in Georgetown for my high school years. And I want to give her entire family, from father and the boys. We will give you our condolences. Just 1 second, Yamacraw. That's the speaker.
Yes.
Sure. We should recognize this honorable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you very much.
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence. Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, sir. I was just making mention of the conditions in terms of where we find ourselves with the COVID-19 pandemic and what I saw happening in Brazil. Mr. Speaker, God has afforded us the opportunity not to see a third wave. There's a young man, and when I find his name, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to bring his name to this house. He spoke about sanctification before sanitation. And his message was so reinvigorating because he spoke directly to church leaders, church members, but how we subvert our commitment to the master, sometimes because of politicians and things. And myself, Mr. Frank, the member for Southern Shores, were there. And he did not hold back. And I really appreciate the youth, the energy of that young man, looking at sanctification and reminding ourselves to put God first in all things. I want to thank God for everything that he has done to bring us thus far in this country, Mr. Speaker, and for the opposition who makes the observations in terms of whether or not things are going right or wrong. That's perfect. And and I want to commend the Prime Minister and all of those who have led the way in advising persons that it's safe to take the vaccine. And I know on the last occasion, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island indicated that he would be taking the vaccine. So, Mr. Speaker, in all the circumstances, I want to encourage our frontline workers to remain committed. They've been soldiers in the fight. Police officers, defense force officers, immigration officers, nurses, doctors, their assistants have done a phenomenal job. And for my colleagues who come out, who brave everything and come out and participate. It would be remiss of me if I did not join join with colleagues opposite and the Deputy Speaker in expressing condolences to the Dames family. And I reached out to the Minister of National Security because there's a gentleman that's near and dear to us. Mr. Peter Dames, a distinguished member of the a distinguished member of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And he had a brother that you know, but who's a lawyer, Mr. Dames, who worked at the prison. And then there's a Defense Force officer, unfortunately, Corporal Dames, who works with myself at the Paradise Island Police Station. He passed away. So there's a whole host of relatives. And so on behalf of my family and I and the constituency of Yamakro, I extend condolences to the family. I would just like to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, as was identified by both sides. Bahamians are hurting. And on going into people's homes, there are persons who do not, some associated with the government, some don't. The majority associated with COVID-19 and what is happening around the world. And in fact, there are persons that are living in their cars. There are men who are trying their best to secure their dignity as the light bill runs, the house bill run, and they can't find groceries. There are seniors, Mr. Speaker, in the community who need, and I was calling my colleagues to reach out to them or to call someone in the community, because we can't do it all, to reach out to them and to assist. But one of the profound things, as I was speaking to one of my constituents on Saturday, as identified by a brilliant young psychologist. I saw him on television yesterday, and he and I went to, and I'm not suffering a senior moment. Mr. Knowles, he and I went to, well, he came to you when I was there to do some exams, but he spoke about the psychological effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the downside of the financial constraints we find ourselves in. One of the community members said, Johnson, this is something that's very serious in terms of what is being identified in our community and how we deal with it. And so I call on my colleagues, the church, all and sundry, to recognize that we are still in a difficult time. And so I close, Mr. Speaker, by saying, as I began, here the final analysis, and that is, no matter what you've heard today, and I commend everybody for their sentiments, and we take them on, that there is absolute or total agreement that these bills are necessary, that they're transformative, that they're conventional, that they will assist with the transparency and accountability in the Bahamas. And I will close by saying I commend members of the Ministry of Finance, and I would be remiss of me if I did not identify someone that's sitting here, and I know she doesn't want to do it. Distinguished legal luminary, all will agree. From the, as they say, the government. And when I practice, and I would have God's time, and I would go back to practice. She's a mentor of mine. I appeared before her on many occasions at the legal aid department, even when I went into private practice. In the person of Madam Justice retired, Rhonda Bain. I salute members like yourself, Justice Thompson, Justice Aubrey, and others who are committed to service. And there are many things that you can be doing. There are many things that you can be doing, but for the love of your country and to see it go from height to height, you basically, because you can't pay them for what they do, you cannot pay them. You volunteered your services to come and assist. I salute you, Madam Justice Dean, and all the AFS, the former Deputy Prime Minister, the Ferguson who was here yesterday, and everybody who has worked assiduously together to decide on it to bring these bills here today. And so, Mr. Speaker, without more, I now move for the third reading. Pardon me? For the second reading on committal of of the compendium of bills.
Thank you, honorable member.
Okay. Now read
First one is the
the
finance
public.
management.
Okay. Read the full long title.
Yeah.
The Public Finance Management Bill 2021.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, I just wish to join the honorable member for Yamakro in the sentiments expressed to Honorable Justice, retired Justice Rhonda Bain. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government's property, for the preparation of financial statements and reports of public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditure for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of financial statements and reports on public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and the incidental thereto.
For the second reading, committal of bill. Chair recognizes honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for a second reading of the Public Procurement Bill.
Second.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department to promote transparency and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide framework and procedure for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department, to promote transparency and integrity in public procurement, and for connected matters.
For the second reading and committal of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker, I rise and move for second reading and committal a bill for an act to the Public Debt Management Bill 2021.
Second.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to consolidate the law relating to the management and control of public debt in the Bahamas and to provide for governance aspects, high-level policy objectives, and institutional arrangements for the prudent management of the government's debt, the giving out of guarantees, and the granting of loans, and to provide for matters connected therewith or ancillary thereto. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that this bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to consolidate the law relating to the management and control of public debt in Bahamas and to provide for governance aspects, high-level policy objectives, and institutional arrangements for the prudent management of the government's debt, the giving of guarantees and granting of loans, and to provide for matters connected therewith or ancillary thereto.
Further, second reading and committal of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker, I now arise and now move for second reading and committal of the Statistics Bill 2021.
Second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal the Statistics Act 1973 to establish the Bahamas National Statistical Institute and the Bahamas National Statistical Institute Board to make provision for a national statistical system to facilitate the establishment of standards for collecting, compiling, analyzing, and publishing official statistics and for related purposes. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to repeal the Statistics Act 1973 to establish the Bahamas National Statistical Institute and the Bahamas National Statistical Institute Board to make provision for a national statistical system to facilitate the establishment of standards for collecting, compiling, analyzing, publishing official statistics and for related purposes.
Further second reading.
Yeah, no further second reading, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Committee of the whole House. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House resolves itself into committee and the Deputy Speaker acts as the chair.
Your second. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House now dissolves itself in the Committee of the Whole House with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House in the chair. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The House will now dissolve itself into a Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House in the chair.
Ms. Benny. Chair recognizes the member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to deal firstly with the Public Finance Management Bill 2021. I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
I also wish to recognize Justice Dane as she leaves. I didn't recognize her. I know it looked like her. Thank you, Madam Justice. Retired. It's being moved in, sorry, Southern Shores. You moved. Do I have a seconder? Being moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Need the original copy. Being the long title is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 2 through 15 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 2 through 15 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 15 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 16 through 50 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 16 through 50 be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 16 through 50 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 51 through 87 be agreed.
Been moved and seconded that clause 51 through 87 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 51 through 87 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 88 through 122 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 88 through 122 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 82 through 122 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 123 through 132 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 123 through 132 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 123 through 132 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the first schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the first schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The first schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the second schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the second schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Second schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the third schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the third schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The third schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the fourth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the fourth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The fourth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the fifth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the fifth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The fifth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the sixth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the sixth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The sixth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the seventh schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the seventh schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The seventh schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the eighth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the eighth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The eighth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the ninth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the ninth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The ninth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the tenth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the tenth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The tenth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the 11th schedule be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the 11th schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The 11th schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the 12th schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the 12th schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. 12th schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the bill be accepted in its entirety. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to the Public Procurement Bill 2020, and I move that the long title be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, as we seem to have unanimous agreement, I move that title, the clause 2 through clause 93 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 2 through 93 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 93 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the first schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the first schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The first schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the second schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the second schedule of the bill be agreed. As many members are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The second schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the third schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the third schedule of the bill be agreed. As many members are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Third schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I move to the Public Debt Management Bill 2021, and I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title and commencement of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 through 71 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 2 through 71 of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 71 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the schedule of the bill be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I move to the Statistics Bill 2021, and I move that the long title be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Short title and commencement of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 through 45 be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that clause 2 through 45 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 45 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the first schedule of the bill be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the first schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. First schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the second schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the second schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The second schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the third schedule of the bill be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the third schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The third schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the fourth schedule be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the fourth schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The fourth schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Statistics Bill 2021 in its entirety be agreed.
Being moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank you and ask that and move that the Speaker now takes the chair.
Being moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The Speaker will now take the chair.
Learning.
Sir, I beg leave to report that the committee have gone through the bills, making no amendments thereto.
She supports the example.
Honorable members, Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Committee of the Whole House has reported that the Committee of the Whole House has gone through various bills, having made no amendment thereto. Third reading and passing of bills. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We did well in the interest of time, and through you, since there are 4 bills, I'm going to ask members to save the applause in the interest of time until the end. I move first, Mr. Speaker, for third reading and passing of the Public Finance Management Bill 2021.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of the financial statements and reports on public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, for the collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. As many members that are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the third time.
A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditure, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of financial statements and reports of public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and the incidental thereto.
Order that the bill do now pass, and the title thereof be declared to be Public Finance Management Act 2021. For the third reading of bills, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Public Procurement Bill 2020 be now passed. Then the third time it passed.
Second. Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to provide for the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department to promote transparency and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters. As many members that are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the third time.
A bill for an act to provide for the framework and procedure for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department to promote transparency and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters.
Order that the bill do now pass, and the title thereof be declared to be the Public Procurement Act 2021. For the third reading and passing of bills, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for third reading and passing of the Public Debt Management Bill 2021.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to consolidate the law relating to the management and control of public debt in the Bahamas and to provide for governance aspects, high-level policy objectives, and institutional arrangements for the prudent management of the government debt, the giving of guarantees, and the granting of loans, and to provide for matters connected therewith or ancillary thereto. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the third time.
A bill for an act to consolidate the law relating to the management and control of public debt in the Bahamas and to provide for governance aspect, high-level policy objectives, and institutional arrangements for the prudent management of the government debt, the giving of guarantees and granting of loans, and to provide for matters connected with or ancillary.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title hereof be declared to be Public Debt Management Act 2021. For the third reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move for third reading and passing of the Statistics Bill 2021.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to repeal the Statistics Act 1973 to establish the Bahamas National Statistical Institute and the Bahamas National Statistical Institute Board to make provisions for the national statistical system to facilitate the establishment of standards for collection, compiling, and analyzing and publishing official statistics and for related purposes. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the third time.
A bill for an act to repeal the Statistics Act 1973 to establish the Bahamas National Statistical Institute and the Bahamas National Statistical Institute Board to make provision for a national statistical system to facilitate and the establishment of standards for collecting, compiling, analyzing, and publishing official statistics and for related purposes.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Statistics Act 2021. For the third reading and passing of bills.
No further third reading. Speaker.
Consideration of Senate amendments, resolutions, member statements. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
To raise an issue that a constituent raised with me today, that they tried to access the portal dealing with the tourism assistance. People, no, not these people who have been getting assistance for the tourism sector during this period of COVID shutdown, and they're saying that it's showing discontinued. And so I want to find out whether any member can of the government can advise whether this is a glitch or whether this is in fact the termination of that assistance to people in the tourism industry.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Garden Hill.
I didn't see you there, Gardner.
No problem. Mr. Speaker, I think the question is about the government assistance program to persons engaged in the touristic field. That program has not been terminated. We've agreed that the program will go until March 31st. Consideration is being given to extending the program, but as far as we know in NIB, the program will go until March 31st. I did speak to NIB during the luncheon break about the apparent inability for individuals to verify. That problem will be corrected and they should continue to get their payments from NIB up until March 31st.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I guess by now everyone in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas are fully aware of the incident that took place in Harbour Island last night, where there were loss of life of 3 individuals. On behalf of myself, the residents of South and Central, and including the member of the North and the Northern constituency, we offer our condolences to the families. To Robert's family, Cartwright in Gregorytown, and the McDonald's in the Bowl. Our first habitual, we want you all to know that it is but in time you will get through it. Continue to pray. We are there for you. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. You're recognized as Honorable Member for Tall Pine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wish to, I kind of forgot that that was updated member's statement. So I just want to reiterate my condolences to Ms. Veronica Marshall's family, her children, Bernadette, Keva, Camille, Philippa, her sons, Julian, Michael, and Brian, whom I grew up with in Georgetown as my brothers and sisters. Ms. Veronica Marshall, I'm sure if anybody in this house visited Exuma for any regatta or any function, you would have, or you may most likely have stayed in Marshall's guest house. It's an iconic guest house in the heart of Georgetown. She and her husband, the late Mr. Marshall, John Marshall, were leaders in the Exuma, without a doubt. Every Sunday, we would go to Ms. Marshall, between her and the Simonette, the late Miss Simonette, to collect our food, Sunday dinner. So we grew up in that house, and I want to say on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, on behalf of our friends and family in Exuma, that her life was not in vain, and that it's because of people like her, Mr. Speaker, that I am in this honorable house. Her daughter happens to live in Tall Pines, and so whenever she's in Nassau, she's actually a resident, constituent of mine in Tall Pines, Wellington Avenue Street off Christie Avenue in the Stapleton area. And so I would be visiting that house very soon, as I usually do when she's in town. May her soul and may the souls of departed rest in peace. Speaker, I've already mentioned my stepfather's, deceased stepfather's brother, Mr. Dames. I want to give out my family's condolences and to the Dames family in the rural town area. I know Southern Shores, both persons from Southern Shores, I'm sure Garden Hills and other members of this house will be very familiar with these personalities in Exumas. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I just want to confirm to my residents in Tall Pines, particularly the area of Ballard Road, where we spent the last 2 weeks walking about. There was an area that we know to be designated as a park area. I've been getting calls for the last 2 weeks, Mr. Speaker, about an incident where somebody in the community has put a fence around that area designated for park. I think the residents feel concerned. I want them to know that I've spoken to the Ministry of Works and to Parks and Beaches, and I've verified that that fence was not erected by those departments, and that we will be moving swiftly to build, Mr. Speaker, a fourth new park in Tall Pines through our constituency funds on that very same site. It's something that they're desiring, and we're going to move forward with that. So I just want to let them know that we are continuing our efforts to make their community better, and that we have done the investigations as they've asked me to do as their member of parliament. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity, and again, to those departed residents of Exuma and all of the residents of my constituency who may have passed away in the last week or two, I give my condolences. I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hills.
If I were not to stand here and support my colleague just said about my cousin, Miss Ronnie, as we just all call her, a distinguished Bahamian, someone who has contributed to the Bahamas generally, but Exuma in particular. And Ronnie plays the organ in her church in St. Andrews every Sunday. Been doing that all of my life that I know. And she is really has been a positive influence on every single resident in Exuma, particularly those persons from Georgetown. I will be attending a funeral this week. And when I say on behalf of my other colleagues and certainly behalf of all of my family members from the Exuma Keys, that we will miss her because she kept the family together on the mainland and in Nassau. I'd also like to extend condolences, Mr. Speaker, to the Dames family from Rural Town. And as I was sitting in, as the members opposite were reflecting on his life, I was told a story about Skeeter a long time ago. And I believe this was the time when Mr. Ingram was about to leave the PLP. And you know, the great man that Skeeter was, he was so connected to Sir Lyndon that when the word came down as to what the PLP was about to do, I'm informed that Skeeter went all through that convention and told every single one, the word is down, Sir Lyndon has spoken. And as we all know, the distinguished athlete that he was, the historian that he was, he didn't say much. And I used to tease him all the time. But he knew that I always held the view that somebody's got to belong to the next party. And he always took the position, he said, remember we are Exomians first. And so to the entire Dames family, I want to extend condolences on behalf of my family, on behalf of the ordinary residents from Exuma, and may his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Extending condolences to those family of those who have lost their lives last night in that tragic accident. Second, Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate Pastor Pedersen and Lady Judith Ballou on their 24th and pastoral anniversary of Freedom's Feast, and I commend them for the work that they continue to do in that community as well as in the entire district. But my main reason for standing at this point, Mr. Speaker, is just to express my thanks and appreciation to the team at the Ministry of Finance who worked so hard on the compendium of bills that we just passed. I didn't speak on the bill because I feel that they were fairly ventilated. But I just wanted to express thanks to the Acting Financial Secretary, Marlon Johnson, the team at the Ministry of Finance, the Deputy Financial Secretary, Gerard O'Brien, and Athena Marsh, Consultant Wendy Craig, our Treasurer, Mary Mitchell, the Department, Ms. Wilson and the team at the Department of Statistics, Ms. Tanya Adderley and the team at the Project Management Unit, and the retired Justice John DeBain, who's responsible for looking over all of the drafting that we did, collating and making sense and making sure that the provisions of those bills line up with the other pieces of legislation that would be affected. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank them because it has been a tremendous job. To get those bills done, and they're not easy bills. I think that they're very technical bills, but they will go a long way to moving our democracy forward, putting in place the kinds of systems and controls that will ensure that the hanging people will get value for money, as well as to ensure that the reporting of those activities will be fully transparent, and so that they can have a better understanding, a better appreciation of the inputs that go into decisions that are being made, and be able to evaluate dispassionately the results from the management of those resources going forward. I just want to congratulate the team for a tremendous job in getting those bills done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mount Moriah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to bring condolences on behalf of my family to the Dane family. And the Dane family is one volunteer Dane who works for me at the Ministry of National Security. She actually is a receptionist. And she is the mother of young Henron Dane, 10-year-old who would have lost his life tragically in Baintown just last week. Mr. Speaker, I had an opportunity to visit with the family last week. And came to me, actually I knew some time back, that I was very, very connected to the family. As a matter of fact, the great-grandmother and the grandmother actually were neighbor of ours in the small community of Mount Pleasant Village, the Ferguson family, Mount Pleasant Village, many years ago. Had an opportunity to speak to a volunteer today. She is certainly in good spirits, and she would have just met with the police for the second or third time. And she expressed to me that she is extremely grateful for how they're dealing with the matter, and they seem to be making some progress on the matter. But it speaks to, this incident speaks to the challenges we face, certainly in our nation, in respect to gun violence. And one that it's top on our agenda. Had an opportunity to speak to the commissioner this morning to get some additional updates on this matter, as well as any other previous matters. And he is very cognizant of that fact. And as a result, he and his team continue to work to address this problem, but we understand that the problem is much bigger than that. And we are certainly working it from multiple fronts. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to offer my condolences and that of my family, as was mentioned by some of my colleagues earlier today. So I join them in bringing condolences on behalf of my family to the Dane family. And Skeeter Dane, the father, obviously had a distinguished career in tourism as a distinguished taxi driver. But I happen to know many of his children very closely. Many of them would have served, as was noted by the member for Yamaha, in the police force, the defense force, and throughout public service. And they would have served in a very distinguished way. One of his sons, we also refer to him as Skeeter, actually worked closely with me in the drug enforcement unit while I served there. He actually was my deputy at one point, and he did an extremely great job as my deputy. And he went on, of course, to the passport office, where he would have served for a number of years and served very well. And so to Skeeter and the rest of the family, we wish you the very best. And I will certainly will continue to pray for you and your family as you go through your period of bereavement. And to all of those, Mr. Speaker, who would have certainly in my constituency, the constituency of Mount Moriah, who would have suffered some loss during the past several weeks. That me and my family continue to pray for each and every one of you, that God will continue to strengthen you and protect you and cover you as you go through this time, this challenge in your life. So I rest.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South Beach.
Speaker, just want to extend on behalf of my family, myself, and people of South Beach. Heartfelt condolences to the family of Miss Sophia Lou Heber. Died 2 weeks ago. She lives in Oxford Island Drive. Her mortal remains will be funeralized this Saturday. I wish also to share in the grief that the family of the young student, 10-year-old Enron, now suffers as a result of what has been universally described as an act of senseless violence in our Bahamian society. Too often the victims, unfortunately, are our young people who are in the throes of their initial educational trajectory. And I've spoken about this rather extensively over the years as Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, I visited Columbus Primary School 2 years ago, and a 6-year-old was gunned down as he was getting ready to leave his home for school one early morning. I visited the school, the principal and the teachers. I visited the classroom of the young student. And I was moved by an inspiration to ask the students, how many of you have ever seen a gun? These were 6-year-olds. Every hand raised. I asked, how many of you have ever heard a gunshot? Every hand raised. How many of you have ever seen a dead body in your neighborhood? Every hand raised. This was 2 years ago. So I grew up in Camp Road, born and raised. And it was an environment that many people would attach to its profile, a neighborhood of violence, disorder, chaos. That was some 50, 60, well, almost 70 years ago. So the specter of violence in our Bahamian society is nothing new. And it is one that seems to be growing with some level of discomfort without an apparent remedy to address its root causes. I can't tell you the response, the adequate social response that our Bahamian people should have, except as I've invited people each and every time I have that opportunity. We sing in the Catholic Church, and it may be sung elsewhere. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin. So I know at times, sir, when we meet certain constituencies, organizations, and I don't mean political demographics, I'm talking about groupings of persons, that there is a probable smirk on their faces as if you're not talking to him. But the violence is a community problem. It's a social disease. Someone called it once, Pope Francis, I think, a social virus. And it's one that must be met with the resolve of every single member of our Bahamian community.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join my colleagues in expressing condolences to the families who lost loved ones in the boating accident in Luthra. I also want to send condolences to the Isaacs family and the family at St. Matthews on the passing of Dr. Maurice Isaacs. Condolences to the exterior gardener and the family of Diane Edgecombe. They lost a loved one just in December and then lost Diane about 2 weeks ago. I want to send condolences to Miss Veronica Roll, who is a part of the Residential Care Authority of the Ministry of Social Services on the passing of her eldest sister. Mr. Speaker, to the James family, I sort of spent some time in Exuma. They've always been kind people, and then I had an opportunity to work with Officer Skeeter Dames, and I believe there is another son who is the Family Island administrator. If he's not a son, he is a relative. the son also. Yes, and so my condolences to all of that family. Mr. Speaker, the 2.5, almost 3 years I spent in Exuma, never once that I showed up at the marshal's residence or the store was I turned away because I didn't have enough money for fear of being called in to pay some debt. I might actually confess that I owed all of it. But when Miss Marshall in particular found out of my connection to one Charlemagne Forbes, the house was opened to me. And so you would imagine, Mr. Speaker, on my last visit to Exuma for the opening of the passport office, I came very close to her residence, but I didn't go in thinking that I would get to come back. I never got to come back. And she reported me to my mother-in-law that I was right in the front of her house and I didn't go to hear her. I told my mother-in-law on my next trip that next trip is not to be. So I want to express my condolences to her family, and I want to thank them for the kindness that they have shown during my time in Exuma and after. And I want to say to us as individuals, whenever we're prompted to show an act of kindness, not to put it off because we're not sure that we'll get another chance so to do. I want to also, Mr. Speaker, express condolences to one Nelson Ferguson. Nelson Ferguson lives in Southern Shores, Sunset Park to be exact. He thinks that he owns Sunset Park. He refers to himself as the mayor. When I decided that I would offer myself, he is the first house that I stopped to, and he assured me that I would be the next member of Parliament. But his wife, on introducing me to his wife, all she said to me is, Mr. Campbell, I pray for you. And every time I called that house or visited the house, she would not let me leave before saying, Mr. Campbell, I pray for you. I felt individually important to her, and I'm satisfied that my being here today is in no measure, no small measure, lacking because of her prayers. And so, to the Ferguson family, my most sincere condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. You recognize the Honorable Member for Golden Isles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I should like to add my voice and extend condolences to the families affected by the incident in Harbor Island area last night. Sincere heartfelt condolences to them. Also, Mr. Speaker, a constituent, Mrs. Burnell Humes, laid her husband. They had a memorial service for her husband on yesterday. And I'd like to extend my condolences to her and the family. And finally, Mr. Speaker, to join in and extend condolences to the family of the late 10 years old Cameron Dean, who, as reported by the newspaper, was excited about the movie night by his aunt, the presence of his twin brother and cousin, and life was snuffed out. And Mr. Speaker, you know, as a nation, as a people, we have lost our soul, because when incidents like that happened in the past, there's such an outrage nationally from it has almost seemed as if we've become so insensitive and desensitized to particularly such a violent, vicious act. And so I hope that we become awakened and more sensitized as a people. And so may their souls rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, I would like to express my condolences to the family of the late Dr. Maurice Isaacs and to the family of the late Sydney Captain E.Z. Bain. They were both prairie rats. That is where I learned and developed my basketball skills. A member for Golden Eyes would remember those two persons, Captain Easy. He was a left-hander, a southpaw. He was exceptionally skilled as a pool shooter. He was national champion at one time. He was in the league of the likes of the Rattler and Glenroy Flo Sanders as national pool champion. And Peter Brown, sweet Peter Brown, and myself spent many evenings shooting pool with Captain Easy. Of course, if you allowed Captain Easy to get a shot, the game was over. And so we also remember Dr. Isaacs. He was short in stature, but us taller fellas like myself and the member for Golden Eyes would remember him checking us at the knees. He was immovable in the low post. And so I want to express my condolences to those families for the loss, and especially to all of the Prairie family on the passing of those two favorite sons of the Prairie. With the people from Nassau Village, I want to let you know that despite all the confusion that people are indicating to you that my resignation from the pre-national movement means that I've resigned as your member of parliament, that's fake news. And that I will continue to serve. And if you want me to continue into the future, I will be willing to continue into the future. That's all I will say at this time. There being no further member statements, appointment of select committees, instructions to select committees, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings. The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Speaker, renew all notices on behalf of the office.
Thank you, honorable member. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I renew all notices on behalf of the government and give notice that move that the business of the House adjourn until Wednesday, 10 a.m., 24th of March, 2021.
Honorable.
No, yeah. Following. Yes. Yes. Easter is on the 4th, Sunday the 4th. That's correct. Easter is on the 4th. And you'll be given the time to go.
Honorable members.
No, last time I joined, I gave notice of today. Thank you.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 24th of May. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
24th of March.
24th of March.
Yes.
Oh, I'm thinking about my anniversary.
Not so soon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I finally move that the business of this House adjourn until Wednesday, 24th March, 10 a.m., 2021.
Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to Wednesday, 10 a.m., the 24th of March, 2021. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned to 10 a.m., Wednesday, the 24th of March, 2021.
All right.